Hey, welcome everybody. I'll open our meeting now. Thanks for attending, those that are attending. I think we have everyone here, whether that's, we've got 10 in person and 2 online on Zoom, Alderman Sexton and Councillor Fox. So we are recording this meeting, and it's also being live streamed via the YouTube channel. So I think before we get started, I'll just mention that I think there's going to be a small group, a small delegation with a sign, but they've been informed that they're able to attend, but they have to stay quiet. Is that correct, CEO? Or?
That's correct.
Yep. So if they come in...
Sign, are they?
What's that?
They're allowed to have the sign?
Allowed to have the sign, just can't be disruptive.
Right, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay,
That's unusual, isn't it?
I think that's the practice, is what I've been advised. So.
Well, Lord Mayor, I'd like that practice provided to me in writing.
I would have thought it wasn't allowed, Lord Mayor.
Could through the appropriate officer provide me the practice that's in writing that this council does, though, because I can't recall that. I remember having this discussion with former Lord Mayor Rob Valentine, in which it occurred on one occasion in here, and the next week I proved a point to that elected member, and the officers checked it, and it wasn't practice. People can come in here and dress up in costumes and whatever the hell they want, but as far as having placards in here, Lord Mayor, I've got to say that's not one practice that this council's had. And, I'd like it in writing,
very poor
please.
practice, Lord Mayor, because every lobby group has got to have a sign.
I've seen signs. I remember there was a polar bear carrying a sign.
So I'm going to just make a call that so long as the group aren't disruptive, they're happy to have... happy
You're setting a precedent.
Leave. No, I think there's been the precedent, but
No, it
anyway,
hasn't
let's
been.
move
There's
on.
two
I'll do
aldermen
the
that said there
acknowledgement
hasn't
to
been a
country now.
precedent.
In recognition of the deep history and culture of this place, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the
T-shirt will
land
come
upon which the city of Hobart was built. I acknowledge the determination and resilience of the Palawa people of Tasmania, who have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their identity, their culture and their rights. The minutes of our last meetings, the 15th of March, moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Dutta. Any dissent to those minutes? All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against, say no. It's carried unanimously. Are there any items that anyone would like to propose to be transferred on the open or the closed agenda?
Lord Mayor, I'm just wondering, the item... back to closed.
Closed, was it?
Yeah, closed. Just item 8. Does it really need to be on closed? I don't want to mention the name of it.
You can move it.
Hold on, we need to know what it is.
Yeah. You know, it's not a major thing, because it's really a very straightforward matter, and I don't think it really does any detriment to anyone or.
Number we're talking about?
Sorry.
Eight.
Look, I'll test the floor, Lord Mayor. I move item 8 into open, Lord Mayor. I don't think it's.
Alderman Barakis, Deputy Lord Mayor, you'd like to speak?
Lord Mayor, can you have some advice in relation to why it's on the close before I vote on this, please?
Who did this? Mr. Short, is this one yours?
Yeah, Lord Mayor, through you, as a matter of practice, a commercial tender always goes to closed committee first. It's certainly within council's prerogative to move it into open if that's what it wishes.
And that's the point, Lord Mayor. It has gone to committee and closed. There was nothing controversial about it. That's why I'm flagging it.
Okay, I'll put Alderman Zuko's motion. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. It's carried unanimously. Item 3, I don't have any communications. Item 4 is the notification of council workshops. It was on the 22nd of March. It was about the State of the City report, or the draft one, and a civic and cultural precinct project update, and there were 6 elected members in attendance. Item 5 is public question time. Is there any public questions from the floor? We don't have any notice of any. No, it's unusual. Okay, moving on to petitions. Are there any petitions that have been submitted?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. There is in fact one petition this evening, and this petition has been submitted by Ms Gemma Kitsos of Strickland Avenue, and it is regarding keeping children safe at the crossing of Macrobies Road in South Hobart. Action sought by the petitioners is a reduced speed limit, signage and traffic slowing measures. And there's some rationale outlined. We need the traffic calming measures, signage and a reduced speed limit before someone's killed. The City of Hobart Council needs to take responsibility to slow their vehicles and keep children safe. Total number of signatories, Lord Mayor, is 232.
Lord Mayor?
Lord Mayor, I move that the petition be, a report be prepared for the appropriate committee meeting, presumably Infrastructure Services.
Seconded by Alderman Barakis. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Okay, supplementary items. Is 23 a supplementary item? Moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Dutta. All those in favour of that supplementary item say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 8 is indications of pecuniary or conflicts of interest. Do any elected members wish to indicate an interest in any item appearing on the council agenda? There being none, move on now to item number 9, which is City Planning Committee. I'll invite Deputy Lord Mayor to...
Alderman Barakis chaired that meeting.
Okay, Alderman Barakis, thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, I'll move item 9.
Second by Alderman Thomas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, this is for a rezoning to rezone 21, 21B and 21A of Enterprise Road, Sandy Bay, from general residential to low density residential. The reason this has come about, we had a development application a little while back that I think most people agreed with. I think it was unanimous, may have even been, that the development that was proposed was inappropriate for the area. It being a directly abutting a reserve in a sort of less accessible part of the area. And the reason we are in this situation is because we have a piece of land that's inappropriately zoned. It was not intentionally zoned as such. It was the sort of accidental or inadvertent changes of planning schemes when the planning schemes changed and things were lumped into general residential when there wasn't a appropriate category to put them into. So we've got a piece of land that's zoned as general residential that should not be such. And I think generally everybody agrees, perhaps other than the owners of that land, that this is a inappropriate zoning and that it would be much more appropriate as low density. So look, I'll move that. I think it's a pretty self-explanatory issue there.
Who was that seconded by?
Me, Thomas.
Alderman Thomas, sorry, that's right. Any discussion? Deputy Lord Mayor?
Yes, Lord Mayor, I couldn't be at that meeting, but certainly feel that this is the best way that we could approach the use of this land. It's right up on the top. Enterprise Road is right up on the top of above the highest point of Sandy Bay before you get to bushland. It is really something that seemed to be a missed zone, the way that it has been zoned for such density as it is currently. So I wholeheartedly support this planning scheme amendment and thank the community for the work that they've done to make this, or the work that they've done to help get this before council, because I think it's certainly a better move and better land use strategy in that part of the city.
Any further discussion? Alderman Sexton or Fox, Councillor Fox? No discussion? Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. It's carried unanimously. Item 10 is short stay accommodation, proposed amendments. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll move item 10 as the recommendation from committee, and I'll reserve my right, for the purpose of debate, and I'll reserve my right to speak.
Seconded by
Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe. discussion? Any discussion? Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and again, couldn't be at this meeting where it was discussed, and I think there were some deputations provided in relation to how important this is. So this motion it's had a long journey to get to council. We started this back in December 2020, and then I think with it coming back in the following year, it was strengthened, and it strengthened the idea for us to use our planning levers and advocacy to the planning minister for better housing availability in our municipality. So we wanted to see better outcomes for the planning directive number 6. So that's the short stay accommodation specific planning directive, which gives the minister particular powers, and that allows visitor accommodation in existing buildings of up to 200 square metres, unless part of a strata scheme with existing residential use, and it doesn't allow councils to limit short stay accommodation further through existing planning instruments. So it's kind of limited through our planning schemes, the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme and Sullivan's Cove Planning Scheme. And so to me, the advice coming back to you, Lord Mayor, after you wrote the letter was from the minister was really read the hand. You know, there's not much I can do as minister, but make an application for an amendment to the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme, because that has been an instrument that councils have used for other directives, not this specific one, the short stay accommodation one. So here we are. We've got various amendments to tackle one of the areas which is devouring houses and accommodation, and it is, I think, incumbent on this council to make this change so that there are more houses staying on the market rather than going to short stay accommodation. So we have these planning levers. We had some changes that I suggested through rates differentiation, which we're looking at as well for short stay accommodation. So it's a matter of really working where the state government is not doing much in this space, and they're slow to act in relation to how we can use the planning mechanisms. I think in the report, which was part of the City Planning Committee report, sections 8, 9 and 10, which look at the objectives of the Act, look at how this benefits our community economically, socially and environmentally, and I think it is incumbent on our council to make these moves. So this will be advertised through the Tasmanian planning regulations, if you like, and before it goes to the Planning Commission. So the public, various platforms will have a chance to have their say, and I certainly encourage everybody who's interested in this space on one side of the debate or the other side to have their say when it goes through that advertising period.
Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. And thanks, Deputy, for your opening there. Lord Mayor, I think it's quite clear that the housing crisis has crushed the spirit of many Australians who can no longer afford to find a home to rent, or they can't even compete in the market to buy a home because homes are so expensive now. And I think we've got to look at the contributing factors to this, and the short stay accommodation industry is a contributing factor. And if you look at Hobart, for example, 9% of homes in Hobart are in short stay accommodation. So that's a huge percentage. It's the highest number of any capital city in the country, as I understand. So I think there is a moral obligation for this council to do as much as it can to try and alleviate the housing crisis and give a little bit of hope to people looking for homes to rent or homes to buy and not be in a field with people continuing to accumulate homes to put into the short stay accommodation industry. And I think housing accumulation is not a desired occupation that we need to be, in favour of. I really struggle with people wanting to own as many homes as possible so that they can put them into short stay accommodation. And I do know that there are people in that category who do acquire homes specifically for short stay accommodation. And also would like to comment on the response from the short stay industry. It doesn't matter how vociferously they argue that it's not their fault. I think there's clear evidence that they are part of the blame for the housing crisis, and young people have a right to be outraged. A whole generation of people have a right to be outraged that they may never own a home, or indeed they may never be able to rent a place because of the high rental costs that we're now seeing. And Professor Phibbs, who's an expert in this field, has indicated that a number of houses were put back on the market during COVID, 100 houses or so, and that led to a decrease in rents of around the 9% mark. So there is clear evidence that the number of short stay accommodation in Hobart has a huge impact on rental affordability and housing affordability and homelessness. So I commend the council for bringing this to us, and I'll be supporting this motion as it stands on the books now, as it stands, and also acknowledge that it will be going out for a 28-day period for engagement, and that's another important part of the process. So Hobart will follow the process with this, and we'll see what happens after that 28 days engagement. But I encourage everyone around the table tonight is to stand up for the young people of Australia and the young people of Tasmania and those who are struggling to find housing. So I encourage everybody to support the motion as it is tonight.
Further discussion. Councillor Coates.
Look, thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll keep my comments brief. I covered most of this when it came up at the committee, but for the benefit of members, some of whom weren't able to be at the committee. Look, I don't support this motion as it is. I share Councillor Bill Harvey's anger, and if you like, I share it on behalf of my generation at the state of the housing market more broadly, and especially the state of the housing market here in Hobart. It does fall disproportionately on younger generations, Gen Y, I'll put my hand up, I remember, Gen Z coming through now. It is a huge difficulty and a huge challenge for Australia and for Hobart. But what we're voting on today isn't necessarily going to fix that. I do fear that it's going to have unintended consequences, and I think it is a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. Look, as the Deputy Mayor mentioned in her speech, there's currently underway already processes in place to look at other levers we could pull, but in my mind this lever was a big fat red button, and in my experience we should be very, very careful before we hit that button. Just, on a personal anecdote, I mean, I'll admit I use Airbnbs. I've travelled, I've used them, I can find them very convenient, but they're not the only source of accommodation. Hotel markets matter as well. As we stand here, we had advice from officers that 630 hotel rooms have been taken off the market. And we wonder why there's demand for short-term accommodation. I was thinking about my own circumstance, and as many of you know, I have family on the mainland. What many of you don't know is I've got cancer in the family, and there's been cancer scares in the past. It's not impossible that I'd find myself in a situation where I'd want to put my home on the short-term rental market because I'd find myself, living on the mainland for potentially months at a time, caring for family. And look, when we change the planning scheme to just completely knock out this option, it does have unintended consequences. There are people who work in fly-in, fly-out. There are people who go on a 12-month trip around Australia, and while they're doing that, they put their house on the short-term market. And it's not always necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't always come at the expense of long-term rentals. I think if we can agree that there's a shortage of long-term rentals, we need to look at how we can get more long-term rentals that are appropriate for the demand built and approved. We as a council have a policy that we contribute nothing to any of the Greater Hobart Council's greenfield development. That's our policy. We contribute zero. We rely on the other councils to do it. We as a council have been not particularly, in my view, proactive in terms of trying to get more hotel rooms to market, more accommodation options in the city. You know, there are other levers that we potentially should pull before we hit that big red button. And look, I appreciate that at this moment this is a heightened issue, and it's obviously something that we all wish to have a quick win on and try and get something through, but putting in an amendment to the planning scheme to just say this whole option is not going to be allowed is, I think, a step too far, and it does have unintended consequences, and there will create a second class. There'll be a class of people whose houses have these permits. There'll be a class of people who are going to be following this debate now who will rush out and get a permit for their home, and then there'll be everyone else who misses out. And going forward, if we completely ban these, I do fear that we won't get the desired outcome, and it's a relatively blunt instrument that we're seeking to do, and I think it will just create further division. I mean, we do need to acknowledge that there is a role for short-term accommodation for various scenarios, and yes, we need to look at how we can improve the rental market, but we also need to acknowledge that, you know, we are a tourism town and visitors actually do make up the fabric of our society. So look, I think this policy is just too much, too soon, and we are still in a flux environment. As I said, there's hotel rooms off the market at the moment. We don't know what tourism is going to be like in the next 12 months. I appreciate the sentiment and I appreciate the desire to resolve the housing crisis, but in my view, this policy as it stands in front of us today is not one that we should be supporting. Thank you.
Oh, I think question from the
Question too.
Yeah.
So.
Two questions, Lord Mayor, through you to Mr Noy. Could you tell me, is this retrospective? I mean, does it stop existing visitor accommodation to continue?
Yeah, through you, Chair. No, it doesn't stop those legally established properties from continuing.
Thank you. And a second question, if I might, Lord Mayor, through you to Mr Short. Mr Short, when we were discussing my motion last week, I got some figures in relation to vacancies in relation to hotel accommodation. And I seem to recall there was about a 20% vacancy over the peak period this year. Could you confirm that, please?
Short.
Lord Mayor, through you, yes, my memory serves me correctly. Yes, I think it was about that figure.
Thank you.
Alderman Zuko.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, through you to the appropriate officer can answer this. Could the appropriate officer provide me with the total number of homes, apartments, and ancillary accommodation in the city of Hobart, please?
Total residential dwellings.
Residential dwellings, yes, total. That includes ancillary dwellings and also...
3,000 or so.
Sorry?
That's a guess. That's my guess. Mr Noy.
Sorry, if I could be clear, is that for short-term visitor
No,
accommodation?
not short-term.
Total dwellings.
Just total amount of dwellings in the city of Hobart that includes ancillary dwellings and apartments.
Look, it's in the order of 21,000, 22.
21.
My understanding, Chair.
21,000.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Further discussion.
Lord Mayor, just a question for clarification. With this particular amendment, is it true that it is not going to affect all the different suburbs or zones? Please would you clarify that?
Yes, Chair, that is correct. It only is applicable to general residential, inner residential and low residential. I would also point out that in the instance where a person wants to go on vacation, they are entitled also to rent out their property on short stay visitor accommodation under those circumstances, or if they've got an extended reason for vacating that premise.
Further discussion? Councillor Dutton?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. Now, I am of the view that the question for me is, what has caused this problem for us. Is it Airbnb that has caused this? And my answer is no. So we can't really say that we are in this situation simply because of houses going on to Airbnb. It is my suggestion and my considered opinion that there are a number of factors or variables that have impacted this, and therefore we are in this situation. Firstly, I think the state government, with its plan to sponsor people, and a lot of people I know, it is my understanding at all, can be misusing it and abusing the system to get in. It is also my view that the federal policy on immigration suggests that if you go to a regional city, you'll be able to get X number of points for your permanent residence, etc., etc. And therefore, a lot more people are coming here. Airbnb is another factor that factors into this particular equation. So while I don't totally blame Airbnb, I think it is a factor that contributes to that. When it comes to state government policy, federal government policy, we are not in that jurisdiction to make an impact as far as decision making is concerned. But in this area, we are. We are able to make an impact in this area. And therefore, I am happy to support this when I look at the facts. The facts for me are very important. You know, since 2016, the net amount of people who migrated to our states or in the local government area in Hobart was 427. In 2017, 18, 19, it went up. It doubled, in fact. In 2017, 883. In 2018, 865. In 2019, 953. And there was that pandemic, and therefore it reduced to about 500 something. So what I'm saying, there is a great demand for housing. Now, the facts have already been made, and we know that the evidence we have provided to us by Professor Phibbs quite clearly and categorically has shown us that there isn't a correlation, but there is a causation. And the fact is, when during the COVID, the houses moved back into rental, we know how that the rent decreased. And so there is evidence. Evidence also is found in the Harvard Business Review that the Airbnb is having detrimental impact on housing stock for long-term rental. And so therefore there are heaps of evidence that quite clearly shows that there is this particular issue we need to deal with. Now for me, to sum it up, there are 4 points. Firstly, that the proposed motion, as has been so clearly clarified, does not apply to all the zones. So to paint that picture or give an impression that is going to apply to all the zones is not necessarily correct. This motion before us went through the process. It went through committee, it went through council, and then it was approved, and therefore we are here now because of that process. We debated and argued. And I'm quite happy with the motion that is in front of us. The other important point for me to note has already been stated, that there will be public comments, public participation. And I think it is very, very important. We have constantly heard about consultation, and public will be consulted. They will have that opportunity. And finally, let me finish by saying that the end decision is going to be by the Planning Commission of Tasmania, not by us. They will look at the evidence, they will look at all the submissions and make that particular decision. Thank you.
Alderman Thomas.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. First of all, I'm comforted by the reassurances of Mr Noy. I think it's really important that those provisions apply. This is a very important decision of this council to use a lever like this, which effectively will curtail, constrain, stop a person using their property as they should wish, should only be exercised by government of any form very carefully indeed. If we actually curtail the rights of a landowner who've invested in their property, who've done things, and wish to use it in a way in which up until when or if this goes through the Planning Commission, I think we should be, anybody looking at it should say we will only do this if the ends justify the means. I think it's also important that we realise that we shouldn't blame international students, and I know you weren't doing that, Councillor Dutta, so much, and it is true that every part of Australia other than Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane are regional, so don't think it's just us, it's Ballarat, it's Adelaide, it's Hobart. There's nothing very special about us at all in terms of the regional status. Students, incidentally, if you feel a bit better about it, are actually moving out of Hobart and are heading up to places like Kindred, which I had to look up on a map, Smithton. They'll surely find King Island very soon, but they are moving out of Hobart. Anecdotally, I'm aware that there are a large number of students that actually either for affordability or availability are moving out. It's also important, I think, that, and I am going to support this, Deputy, so you have my vote on this, subject to the discussion that follows. The reality is that this goes back to 2014-15, and the people who were at the wheel at that time in the state government, the various advocacy groups for housing, could have approached, particularly housing, could have approached economic development in 2013, 14, 15 and said, what's happening out there? We're becoming very popular. Seems like we've got housing is on the boil. We're actually getting a lot of more international arrivals. We're actually extending the runway. Here we're going to extend it even further. And we're actually getting a tourism bonanza, which leads to growth in popularity of the city. And we've seen that. Those elements were there, Lord Mayor, in 2013-14. There is no reason why the state government was so asleep at the wheel in many ways when the housing crisis started. This council has done a lot. This is a measure. As I say, it's unfortunate we have to pass a measure like this because of the reasons I've explained, but this does have its roots back several years, and in actual fact, I have no idea how we weren't, no one could say we didn't see this coming because the information was there, the statistics were there, and the statistics in this case don't lie. So it's an unfortunate thing that we may be exercising through the majority vote tonight. As I said, I'm reassured by some of those reservations that won't apply here, but it's a sorry state that we've got ourselves in. And I am hearing that people to get rent are actually renting as far afield as Tribunna at the moment. So it's a parlous state that we've got a capital city with all the attractions, and yet we've got this situation applying.
Oh, sorry, Alderman Zipper.
It's
Councillor
not a
Fox
question
has had
anyway,
then.
whenever you're ready.
Councillor Fox, your turn, I think.
Thank you. There's undeniable evidence that short stay accommodation affects rental availability and affordability. Having over 9% of an already scarce rental market tied up in short stay accommodation with no limitations on its expansion is pretty irresponsible. It's not just peer-reviewed data, which we've got, that backs this evidence up. There's like so much anecdotal evidence. I know so many people, so many friends and family members who have, lost their homes, their rental properties, because the owners have decided to convert it to short stay accommodation. And people my age, me as well, I've been priced out of our city, and I just think that's crap. I'm not sure what unintended consequences have been referred to in this debate, because this motion is not going to prevent people from advertising their primary place of residence as whole home listings during absences, if they're going away on holiday or whatever, as Councillor Coates has suggested. It's also not going to prevent people listing spare rooms. It's just to prevent the expansion of whole home conversions without limitations. I would also just like to note once again that several elected members present tonight own short stay accommodation properties, which to me feels pretty conflict of interesty, but there's nothing that I can do about this. I'm just putting that out there for the information of everyone here and the general public. I would also just like to thank the staff for all the work they've done in putting this together. I think it's a really important step for us in terms of responsible planning for our local government area. And as Councillor Bennett has said, I also encourage anyone with an interest in this to put in a submission when this goes out for consultation, you will have the opportunity to have your voice heard on this. This isn't the end of it, but this is a really important step for us to be taking tonight. Thank you.
Alderman Zucker.
Yes, Lord Mayor. I just need to know the number bandied in the report in respect of the amount of short stay housing that's on the market at the moment. There's a number in the report, 400 and something.
Mr. Noy.
Lord Mayor, 481, I think.
481,
Yeah.
that's correct, Lord Mayor. So we've got 408, the supplementary question, we've got 481 houses, 481 on the short stay rental accommodation. We've got 21,000 houses. Could the Director please, in each time, provide me what the percentage factor is? Thank you.
Through you, Lord Mayor, it's in the order of 2%.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Note of clarification, Lord Mayor. I think Alderman Zuko is confused about the whole number of houses versus the number of rental properties. So when we're talking about rental properties off the market, it does factor at about 9%.
Yeah, I think it's 6,500 rental properties is in Professor Phibbs's work that he provided to us. Yeah.
Not, that's, Lord Mayor, I'm not talking about rental properties, I'm talking about short stay accommodation here.
There's a percentage of all.
Any further discussion? Before I ask Alderman Brock. Oh, no, it's not your motion, sorry.
It is.
Brock,
I moved it, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I'll be quick on this one. I think it's pretty clear what the council, how the council is going to vote on this at the risk of preempting it. For the reasons I laid out in the committee, I won't be supporting this. And just, I suppose, to quickly reference, I think the confusion around the 9%, Councillor Harvey, in your contribution, you referenced there was 9% of homes, not rental homes.
Rental homes.
Yeah, so I think that's where that came from. I do have some concerns around this in that it's not going to take any of these homes off short stay and onto the rental market. And as was discussed in the committee, I do think that this will end up with the consequence of 481 or however many homes that have, is that, I'll stop with the question, is that the number that currently have permits in Hobart? That's the number we're working with?
Yes, through you, Lord Mayor, that's correct. Yeah.
Although, Mr. Noy, there have been permits issued this year too, haven't there?
Point of order, Lord Mayor. You're intervening whilst Alderman Barakis is speaking and responding to Alderman Barakis' question.
Thank you. It's not a point of order.
It is a point of order, Lord Mayor.
Well, I'm not ruling on that one, sorry. Yes, go ahead, Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. You have almost 500 homes that have permits now that nobody in a residential area will ever be able to have. And the consequence of that will end up being that the value of those homes will skyrocket, as they will now have access to something that no other homes will be able to access. So I think it will have actually the perverse outcome in the short term at least of actually increasing housing prices for a large number of properties. I note that, as was said, this is something that's only affecting the residential zones. And not mixed use, not commercial, etc. But I don't think it's going to have the impact that we are saying it is going to have. I know that this council has been one of the issues that we've all agreed on, is that we do have serious housing issues in the city. I think we've all come together and agreed on that, and where we do butt heads or fall apart is what we think the solutions to that are. I think it is pretty hard to argue that short stay doesn't play a factor in the housing mix and the housing pricing mix, but I do think there is a disproportionate amount of not attention, but of attacking of that sector. I think it doesn't play quite as big of a role in the market as what is being suggested, and I think that, given that I know what the council is going to do here tonight, and this will go on to consultation, it'll go on to the Planning Commission. I do hope that now that we've done this and we've got the motion by the Deputy Lord Mayor to discuss rates, which we'll discuss in full length, that we can then move on to other issues within housing that we can pull levers on, that I think will have more of an effect on housing. I think touching on supply, and I think working to see what levers that we can pull as a council to reduce the input costs of going into housing. I think they're really important things for us to do. I won't elaborate on this much further, other than to say I won't be supporting this motion.
Alderman Zuko.
Yes, Lord Mayor. Look, it's been stated that the government's been slow to act. Lord Mayor, the response from the Minister to you. Firstly, I would like to express my disappointment with your statement that the Hobart local provisions schedule are not due to come into effect at the end of 22. 10 councils have these provisions already in effect. I am advised that the vast majority of other councils across the state will be operating in accordance with the Tasmanian plans in the middle of 22. I encourage council to prioritise its finalisation of this. So it's nice and easy to just go blame the state government. But let's face it, let's look at reality. We've got the Greens, our state Greens over the road that don't believe in the urban sprawl. We had, during the debate on heights, we had a report commissioned by this council to have heights between 60 and 75 metres. But yet there were a number of elected members in this chamber just at the last moment decided to move that we go to 45 metres, Lord Mayor, without a council report, Lord Mayor. Just a moment, I'm just trying to open up my computer again. Lord Mayor, I have sent a number of emails to Mr. Noy this week asking him a number of questions, because it has been this council's policy when you're going to come forward with what a council officer has said is you provide it in writing. I've got it in writing, Lord Mayor. What's quite ironic is the 481 houses that we in turn talk about, and the report's talking about 217, it's actually a report that was commissioned from the 1st of August 2015, not 217. So that's a little bit of misinformation that's going around. The other thing is, Lord Mayor, that since 2017 there's actually been 427 homes. I've got it in writing. And Lord Mayor, not only that, Lord Mayor, insofar as we're talking about homes that have been converted in residential areas, the actual number, Lord Mayor, is, if you want to go off the 481, it's actually 375, because the rest of them were in commercial zones. And if you want to go on what the actual figures are of 217 in 427, which I've got in writing over here, right, that's 307, Lord Mayor. So if you really want to look at the actual percentage of short stay accommodation, if you want to take any figure, in the amount of homes we've got, not rental homes, I'm talking about the amount of homes we've got in Hobart, short stay accommodation, if you want to go on the number of 375, it's 1.85. If you want to go on 307, it's 1.46, and if you want to go on 481, it's 2.29. Lord Mayor, all we're doing here, as far as I'm concerned, is squeezing a pimple. Because if you really want to do something about fixing the problem of housing in this country, or even in this state, but more in particular in this city, we all need to get on the same page and approve more housing. Between 4 elected members in this chamber, Lord Mayor, between 4 of them, they have refused, over the last period, 460 dwellings. That's 4 elected members voted against 460 dwellings. Lord Mayor, that just demonstrates that we as a council need...
Lord Mayor, can I just get a clarification on that in the total context of the 460? Otherwise, the figure is distorted for me.
Lord Mayor, that's a question. My time has stopped. I'll answer the question. Okay, this was tabled in Parliament the other day, Lord Mayor. Right, it's got here, Burnett voted against 517 houses. Reynolds voted against 491. Dutta voted against 477. And Harvey voted against 357. When you add them all together, collectively, you get 460. I said on an average.
And
that was in Parliament, that was tabled in Parliament.
What date is that from, Alderman Zuko?
At 15th of March 2022.
No, but where did it start? When did it start?
Lord Mayor, I haven't got those figures, but it doesn't really matter.
It's about 7 years, I think, data.
It doesn't matter. The point is, look, I'm not here to debate you. I'm answering the question. This is documentation that was tabled in Parliament, so I'm still at the question time I'm answering. Okay, so I hopefully answered the question. Thank you very much. Lord Mayor,
the question I have too, if I may, since we're on this topic, so how many of those were actually built and approved? Does Alderman Zuko have those figures?
Lord Mayor, I don't have those figures. I'm only referring, and again, I'll answer the question. I'm referring to the amount of homes that 4 elected members voted against. The point is that, to me, that determines that there is a problem with this council, and I'm going to get to the point. That's my question. Another question.
Through you, Lord Mayor, to Alderman Zuko. Would it be correct to say that many of those were approved because the others in council did approve it? The council council officers recommended approval, and it got through council in spite of those 4 people voting against it. Is that the point you're making?
Okay, no, that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that the amount of houses that were voted against irrespectively. But I can give you the figure, because you asked me the question just then, I can give you the figure. This is voted against despite recommended for approval, okay? We had Burnett 237, Reynolds 162, Dutta 217 and Harvey 107, at least Harvey sort of, all Councillor Harvey went down the line of a little bit more working with the council officers. So in actual fact, because I'm getting to a point very shortly, Lord Mayor.
Got about
no, I'm seeking 2-minute extension, Lord Mayor, because these questions are doing my head and I need to get back to my debate.
2 minutes.
Lord Mayor, I made the...
we haven't voted on that yet. Seconded by Alderman Briscoe.
I thought I moved it.
He moved it. Oh, I'm happy to second it.
Seconded by Alderman Councillor Harvey. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, and I made the point about the pimple point. The thing is, if we're absolutely serious about fixing the housing problem, we need to think far bigger and beyond just one simple little pimple. One simple pimple won't solve the problem. As I explained before with the debate on heights. Lord Mayor, we need to look at the Building Code of Australia. I've been advocating this for over 15 years. Since the early 90s, I've been working with the homeless. I actually used to employ a lot of homeless people in my restaurants. That's on the record in this council, Lord Mayor. So I've been working in that domain for a number of years. But what we do, Lord Mayor, is we try and find this little pimple over here. We need to look at the Tenants Act I'm not saying detrimental for those people who are renting, to find a best solution that matches the landlords and tenants. I think at the moment, when you've got someone who stays in a home that doesn't pay rent and the landlord is frustrated for another 3 months to get them out, that's why a lot of people are moving away from the rental market, Lord Mayor. We also, if you recall, I put a heads of agreement notice of motion here in 2018. It got lost in other reports. I brought forward the arbitrary system that I introduced to council last week, and I brought forward empty car spaces. We should be working with a number of establishments across the board. We did it with Common Ground. That was my proposal I put forward when we built Common Ground. Looking in a blinkered view is not the way to solve this problem. Yes, short stay accommodation is a problem. I'm not saying it hasn't increased. But last weekend, Lord Mayor, just to give you an example, the city, Hobart, you couldn't get accommodation in any short stay for under $500 a night. So we have got a shortage there. So we've got to find the common ground. So I'd like to move an amendment, Lord Mayor, to this report, because
30 seconds.
Yes, because we got part the blame is this council, that a report come forward on the HCC to consider pursuing through the Planning Commission for an independent planning panel to determine non-delegated planning decisions on housing. And I'll send that to Mr.
No, I'd need that in writing.
I've got it in writing. I can send it.
Well, I'm sorry, but it should have been circulated.
No, I'm sorry, Lord Mayor. It doesn't. Meeting procedures do not say it has to be in writing.
Yes, it does. It says the chair can ask for it to be in writing.
There it is, in writing. There you go.
Well, it needs to be circulated to everybody.
I don't have to circulate to it. I've got to circulate to the minute. There you go.
I will it'll have to come forward as a separate motion, I think, Alderman Zuko, because we don't have it in writing. So
we have got it in writing because
I've got it in writing. I've provided it to Mr. Schmidt.
That's not adequate, I'm afraid. It needs to be provided to everybody in writing, or at least put up.
It's absolutely appalling, Lord Mayor. I've been in this
It's
chamber
not appalling.
30 years,
Yes, I
and
know.
your ruling is absolutely poor.
A point of order.
Absolutely poor.
Point of order. You are making rules up as you
That's
go,
it.
Lord Mayor. You are making rules to stop amendments.
Please sit down.
No, I'm asking that it's a point of order. Point of order. I'd like you to rule on the point of order. You don't have to tell me to sit down. I will sit down. No, these people are interjecting. No, you don't. I'll shout as much as I like. I will. I just did.
If you would sit down,
I will
will
sit
read
down
you.
as long as you've accepted that I've got a point of order.
No, you don't.
Okay, so you've dismissed my point of order. Thank you.
Okay.
I provided the minute taker in writing, Lord Mayor.
My God.
So, emotions.
Self-righteous. Yes, I was the one talking. I wasn't you. No.
It's an amendment.
Amendments, yeah, amendments. Where is that?
I've provided it in writing, Lord Mayor. I gave it to the minute taker in writing.
We're waiting. We need it. I'm asking.
No, you
for
don't need it,
writing.
Lord Mayor. I provided it to the minute taker. It's always been the procedure, Lord Mayor.
Lord Mayor, this approach is undermining and confusing. It's a distraction for what you're doing as chair, and I ask that Alderman Zuko and Alderman Briscoe cease this approach to how they're disrupting this meeting, as with other meetings.
Oh my God.
As with last week.
Oh my God.
Lord Mayor, I absolutely, categorically am appalled by the stance of the deputy. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yes.
I'll just ask the CEO to read out the relevant part.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So just reading directly here from item 16, number 1. If during a meeting a councillor intends to move a motion of which notice has not been given, the chairperson of the meeting may require the councillor to provide a written copy of the motion. The chairperson of a meeting is not to allow a motion to be debated or otherwise dealt with unless it has been moved by one councillor and seconded by the other councillor.
So look,
Lord Mayor, I'm providing it to the minute taker and writing it again.
Point of clarification, I'd like to ask a question of the CEO. A question through you, Lord Mayor, and I'm allowed to ask a question through the CEO when she's on board. The question is that you said a motion, not an amendment. You read out, I'm asking through you, Chair, to the CEO, you did read out a motion, not an amendment.
Lord Mayor, that's correct.
Yeah,
However, the advice is that a motion also relates to an amended motion.
But it's now been provided in writing.
I was providing writing from the start.
well, look, we don't have it. So what I'm going to propose.
Point of order, Lord Mayor. The
No,
minute
no,
taker is the
Alderman
person
Zuko.
that's responsible.
No, I'm the chair of this.
No,
meeting.
you're
Sit
just
down,
chairing,
please.
Lord Mayor. The minute
Sit
taker's been there for as
down,
long as I've been here.
Now, what I'm proposing, given we don't yet have your motion, is that we vote on this motion, and I will accept your motion if it's put up on the screen and circulated so that everyone can read it. We'll do that separately after this motion. I think that's fairest. We get to consider your motion. It'll be on writing on the screen, but let's deal with this motion for starters.
Was it an amendment?
Okay, so we will now move on to.
It's an amendment, Lord
No,
Mayor.
it's a motion and an amendment are the same thing in the Local Government Act. Yes.
Lord Mayor, can I just ask, I've got two actually procedural questions.
Yes.
Just first of all, I know this is an issue that people are quite passionate about, and I know I get points of order, but is it proper during meetings to be interrupting somebody's debate by asking questions? Like, it seems like something that should be asked before or after or responded to separately, but can I get some guidance on what is proper during somebody's contribution? Because surely the only thing that is proper is a point of order. Through you to the CEO.
There can be questions asked of other elected members, and Alderman Zuko seemed to be happy to accept them and answer them. But
Lord Mayor, it is inappropriate, but I did accept them, and as I said, it stole my head in not being able to debate. And then that's right. Okay.
And the other one, just not to pick a very fresh scab, but on the item, on the issue of amendments, if just on requiring that to be provided in writing, during the course of debate, we do very often have issues where we're debating and someone said, that's a good point, or actually, yes, we agree, maybe this, and sometimes amendments are not written, but they're imagined.
This is a question.
They're imagined on the floor of the chamber. So would your ruling on this now preclude people from moving amendments from the floor as they happen in the heat of the moment?
It is up to the discretion of the chair to ask for it in writing, and in this case, because it was a complicated motion, I've asked for it in writing. What I'm proposing is we deal with it as a separate motion after we finish this one. Okay, that's my ruling. So, all right, who else would like to speak on this matter? I'll speak then. Thank you. Look, I think this is, as Councillor Fox said, really important reform. Let's just look at the facts. We do have 480 plus permits that have been issued by the City of Hobart to convert a suburban home into a visitor accommodation business in recent years. Now, yes, it might be 2014, 2017. We also have been issuing more since this last figure, just in the first few months of 2022. The conversion in most recent years has been mandated by state government laws, which do compel us to approve those. But the correspondence and the public comments from the state government have pointed us in the exact direction we are taking, that it should be up to local councils to rebalance their housing market. That is what the Premier has said publicly. That's what the previous Planning Minister has said publicly. They do expect councils to change the planning schemes to adjust to their local market. So we are starting a journey tonight to rebalance the use of residential homes for visitor accommodation. But as has already been pointed out by many others, it's not our final decision. I want to thank the housing policy experts and the staff who've given us very solid advice over recent years. This has been considered with the very best of advice nationally. Independent, expert and policy focused. They have shown clearly with proof that the long-term rental market has shrunk by around 460 dwellings between 2016 and 2019. That is a loss of supply. So you can talk all you like about 163 homes not approved and some sort of strange statistics pulled together by I don't know whom and with which particular elements to it, but if you have been voting for the loss of visitor accommodation, the loss of long-term rentals to visitor accommodation, you have been involved in the loss of 460 dwellings. That is the loss of existing supply, and this is a supply and demand issue, but this is about losing existing supplies. So it's not about picking on Airbnb, it's about looking at a whole range of the issues that affect supply. But this has been an incredibly fast trend. This has really caught up with us. It's caught up with cities all over the country. Most cities around the country are dealing with similar conversations to the ones we are now. And I think you'll see quite a number of cities taking quite similar steps, because this has moved very quickly. It's become very fashionable. There's been whole businesses set up to help property owners convert their homes to hotels, and so it is important that we respond swiftly. Look, I do want to pick up on this spin that the council is not approving enough homes, because there is around 780 new homes that have been approved in the last 3 years by this council. 780. So 98.5% of development applications that this council receives are approved. Now, you can talk about elected members who choose to make a decision about planning advice, and as we know, planning advice is sometimes quite difficult. There are difficult calls and difficult issues to balance, but the basic number that we need to remember is that 780 homes in the past 3 years have been approved by this council, and this council has approved more inner city apartments than any other council before. So the council is working on new supply, but just because we approve things doesn't mean they will be built immediately, and that is not something that is easy for a council to control. I am very conscious of this trend on our hotel sector, which is seeing lower occupancy rates, and the Hotels Association have been to see me and raised with me their concern about these unregulated mini hotels and the unfair advantage they have in the market. In 2016-17, we approved a number of new hotels, and they've been built: the Crown, the Marriott, the Vibe, the Ibis. A lot of those hotels have now found themselves competing with this growth in visitor accommodation. So, look, without these changes being implemented, there is no certainty about the penetration of this kind of accommodation into the Hobart rental housing market. Professor Phibbs has said we've got one of the highest densities of short stays of any city in the country, but the question is, how far will it go unless we take some sort of action? This is fairly modest action. It does affect the residential zones, but short stays will continue in other zones, and all of those other traditional home sharing arrangements will continue. So I do recommend this change.
I do apologise, Lord Mayor, but I do have some questions because you did say about 700. And I've got the statistics that Professor Phillips did give it to us, and the statistics you gave were for Greater Hobart, the 700 surplus.
No, that's
well,
Hobart.
You're saying it's different.
It's different data from Mr. Phibbs's, yeah.
It's different, right? And you said that we got the highest density, but the statistics that the professor supplied to us just compared the major capital cities of Australia and didn't compare comparable cities' size. So you're comparing us with Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane.
Okay, so this is contributing to extra debate.
No, I'm asking you what you made a comment that we've got the highest.
Like me to clarify?
Well, I'm happy for you to provide that as an email to me. That's rather than.
No, I'll answer it now. Thanks if you've asked.
But I'd like it to be an email too.
So,
Appreciate it.
Thanks for your question. So Professor Phibbs has said that the problem for Hobart is it has much more short stay rentals as a proportion of its total private long-term rental market than other cities, what researchers call short-term rental density. In the Sydney LGA it's about 2%, in the Melbourne local government area it's 3.82%, and in the Hobart City LGA it's 9.33%. He does say that in tourist towns there can be much higher densities. In fact, in Byron Bay it's up to 50%. Now that is an extreme holiday rental location, but you know there's a possibility that we could get to much higher densities than 9%.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, for that. Just that you've confirmed what I just said, that it was comparing with the major cities, and Professor Phillips did say, took my suggestion, yes, he'll do some work on comparing comparable cities, and thank you for that, and you know I'm going to support this motion anyway, so thank you.
Okay.
Well, I've got a point of clarification in regards to meeting procedures, if I may. The meeting procedures read as follows: if during a meeting a council intends to move a motion of which notice has not been given, the chairperson of the meeting may require Lord Mayor. And the word may is not has to or that. So Lord Mayor, it really is up to the chairperson whether or not the chairperson would require it or not require it.
Okay, Alderman.
Oh, no, it's not required. So Alderman Barakas's question that he asked about...
Alderman Zuko, this is unnecessary. We have
point of
had
clarification,
this clarification.
Lord Mayor, you hit the
you are reading out
meeting procedures and I'm giving them back to you, Lord
You
Mayor.
are reading out exactly the same procedures
May
that
is not has to, Lord
the
Mayor.
CEO just read out, so we don't need that clarification.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
So I'm going to put this to the vote.
We've got to sum up.
No, do you need to sum up? No. Okay, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no.
Aye.
Show of hands, all those in favour.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Alderman Zuko, Councillor Coates and Alderman Barakas. It's carried, Lord Mayor. 8 votes to 3.
Thank you. Now, if we can put up Alderman Zuko's motion on the screen so we can look at it and vote on it.
Oh, I can only read
There we go.
I wonder if Alderman Zuko could talk to it. Explain it.
I've got to be asked if I'm allowed to speak.
Yes. Is there a seconder for Alderman Zuko's, Alderman Barakis?
Lord Mayor, people know that for nearly 18 years I've been pushing that we should have a independent planning authority right across the state in 3 sections of the state. I've been advocating that for nearly 18 years now. And Lord Mayor, the reason why I've pushed it into this phase, because we're going to the Planning Commission with this amendment, this will be a good chance for us to actually make sure that anything that's non-delegated, and I've got to say, Mr. Noy knows me well, and the CEO start to get to know me in regards to planning matters. I actually would prefer that all planning matters were delegated to our staff, but unfortunately, due to certain policies that we decide to put in place, it's for against or whatever have you, Lord Mayor. That's why Mr. Noy has to come to this council. To me, this is all about housing, Lord Mayor. To me, I made my points. We're going to disagree in respect of my calculations and the information that I've been provided with in regards to housing. But I did make the point in my debate and my discussion that we need to start doing things outside and looking at the big picture. This, to my point of view, is another example of looking at the big picture, because when you have any elected member, it doesn't matter what political persuasion we are, when we have any elected member that's voting against a particular application because of X, Y or Z, and say a court is a prime example, Lord Mayor. It came back to us from the tribunal, and certain things happen behind closed doors. Lord Mayor, wouldn't it be absolutely fantastic for the community to understand that no elected member is going to get up on the chamber, and because Marty Zuko has lobbied Jeff Briscoe, because my neighbour is going to build a couple of stories higher, that is determined by an independent panel, rather than the elected members getting email after email from copy and paste emails a lot of the time, so we are swayed in our decision making. Now, to my point of view, the reality is when we are elected members, we are lobbied in all directions. But when we put our planning hat on, we should be thinking planning, but we don't do so. I've been here 30 years and I've seen it, Lord Mayor, time and time again. We supposedly put our planning cap on, but we don't put our planning cap on. And all I'd like, and mind you, Lord Mayor, I'm not pushing the barrel of us giving everything away, but just on housing decisions. Let's say to ourselves, okay, let's have an independent panel. We used to have Lord Mayor, we used to have a planning advisory panel that used to provide advice to the planning committee, if you recall, Alderman Briscoe, in the days of council, when Alderman Archer was the chair. We had an advisory panel that used to advise us on those matters that were coming to planning. Through you, Mr. Noy, is that correct or incorrect?
Yeah,
Sorry?
Through you, Lord Mayor, I'm just concerned about officers being brought into the debate.
No, the question is, did we or did we not have a panel? That's all. Mr. Noy.
Yes, through you, Chair, we had the Battery Point Advisory Committee.
Right, so we had a panel there advising us on matters in Battery Point, Lord Mayor. So the point I'm getting here, Lord Mayor, it's specifically about planning. It'll be housing. It'll be a good way of us all standing back, not being lobbied on housing, and anything to do with housing, it goes to the panel. I think it's a great way to start moving forward.
Alderman Briscoe.
Look, I do know of various states that we councils in various states haven't got the planning hat on, and I think it's the Northern Territory is one that comes to mind. Darwin does not have a planning role. it can lobby on the behalf of the community for the planning applications that go in front of I just can't recall what it's called now, but an equivalent planning. I'd be interested. I'm not totally convinced that a separate independent panel is the way to go. But I'd like to know a little bit more about the national scene. How many councils have our planning hat on in terms of housing? We all know we've got a housing issue, and Alderman Zuko is right. We do get lobbied by members of the community. I always think that we have to have a fairly independent voice, and we sometimes express the community voice, and it's not sometimes, but when we've got our planning hat, we've got to have a judicial role where we shouldn't be biased either way. And I've heard recently in the last few years, a lot of reasons to refuse things are very much just emotional. It's not on the planning scheme in front of us. I can give you numerous examples just recently. Irrespective if it's the law, I still think the law is wrong. I'm going to vote against it. You know, those sorts of things which you never heard prior to this council being formed. So I think there's a lot of merit in a report, and it can be a short report just comparing what states and what councils don't have or do have that planning hat on. I know big developments in the mainland, and I think it's Melbourne, have over a certain limit, it does go to a separate independent planning panel, and the little things stay with the Melbourne City Council. We haven't had the pleasure of having really big developments, so we haven't had that pressure. But I'm interested in a report, a short report about should Hobart City Council have that planning role, or what parts of the planning role should we be involved in?
Any further discussion? Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Look, I'm very supportive of a report. However, I'll be waiting for the most important report, which is the Tasmanian Government, who have commissioned a local government board review into the future of local government in Tasmania. The objectives of the review is to create a more robust and capable system of local government that's ready for the challenges and opportunities of the future. The board will make recommendations on the future role, functions and design of local government and the structural, legislative and financial reforms, etc., etc. So what I would encourage is for councillors and aldermen who are keen to be part of the review to submit their representation and explain carefully to the board what they think the changes in local government should be. So I won't support this report, but I will support the process already underway in Tasmania. It's commenced, it's underway, and I look forward to the outcome of a thorough investigation into local government in Tasmania, because I'm very hopeful that there will be reforms, and I hope one of those reforms might even look at how long we should be in office. So should there be a cap on councils?
You and I will go then.
So this will be arriving in about 18 months. It's a long process.
Another 18 months.
We might all get another go. Anyway, but that's where I sit, and I'm very much looking forward to that review.
Alderman Thomas.
Yeah, look, I think the difficulty of a clause like this is similar to several instances in the last few months where the paper the morning after ignores a lot of this and says Hobart City Council to push for an independent panel to determine non-delegated planning decisions on housing. We've seen it happen time and time again, and we're met at the supermarket, oh, you're going to push that, are you? That's happening. No, we're actually just going to have a report to see whether we should do it in what situation. If that read, that a report comes to the Hobart City Council on the national position regarding panels determining non-delegated planning decisions, I'm fine with that. But this again puts us, and it's not intentional, I'm sure, it again pushes us towards a headline that that's what we're going to do. And that's my problem. I don't mind getting a national report, that's fine, but not the way it is at the moment.
What could you suggest? That summarises the national... Do you want to propose an amendment?
Report come forward to the Hobart City Council.
Amendment as the mover of the motion on housing, and also consider the national status.
The national position.
National position.
No,
so I'll add and consider the national position.
No, but I think Alderman Thomas was asking for it to replace...
That's a national position per se. Yeah, simple. A report come forward to report on the national position regarding independent panels determining non-delegated planning decisions on housing. Full stop.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to add that in. That's fine.
No, you're not there.
Change,
It can be your motion. Don't worry. Don't worry. It's your
Lord
motion.
Mayor, I said I'll add that in as a move to the motion. I'm adding that in.
And add to change.
Good motion, David.
It's just adding two words in.
No, it's not.
That a report come forward on the Hobart City Council consider.
No.
Alderman Thomas, stand again,
No,
please.
it stops at the report come forward to the Hobart City to the Hobart City Council. A report come forward to council on the national position of independent panels determining non-delegated planning decisions on housing.
That's right. It's just a leading through the three words, the Planning Commission. That's it. To the national position. That's all.
I can give it to you. It's
In writing. In writing. Yeah. So you're okay with that, Mr. Minute Taker?
We're moving to consider pursuing
where the
through the
report
planning
come forward.
commission.
That's right.
Yeah. To get a summary
the
of.
seconder has to agree with it.
Who's the seconder? He's agreeing with
Are
it?
you happy with that, Alderman?
Yeah, I'm happy.
Okay, so is everyone clear that the motion now reads that a report come forward to the council that summarises the national position of independent panels determining residential planning decisions. Okay.
Oh.
Councillor Coates.
Look, I'll speak very briefly. I'll be voting in favour, so I think that's very sensible. I just wanted to reflect. We've had one of the difficulties, I think, with a lot of these more complex planning items is where, obviously us as elected officials are put in a position and then, look, you have obviously one group in favour of development and they go and seek an expert planner who commissions a report and it says, yes, complies. We then get another group who go out and get an expert planner and you have an expert planner's report that says it doesn't comply. And you sort of sit there and go, well, obviously when it comes to interpreting and looking at the planning scheme and the Planning Act, the most important thing is we've got to be open to advice and expert advice. And so look, often it does become difficult. One of the huge advantages of having a panel of experts is you can actually get that expertise in the room. Now, I'm not trying to denigrate us as elected members. We do a very good job representing our communities, and a lot of us have a huge amount of experience in this area. But when it comes to some of the more complex ones, some of the ones with the sort of heightened community tension, where really what the developer is seeking and what the community is seeking is that the planning code be applied appropriately, because ultimately that's the rule as to what is and isn't allowed. I think there are advantages somehow in a lot of cases of having an independent panel, rather than sort of having us as lay people, not professional planners, sort of being the ultimate decision makers. So look, I think there is merit to this, and I would support it.
Alderman Zuko, with your indulgence, I'll read out what the officers have given me, just to make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah, because I've sent it to the officers what Alderman Thomas said. Okay.
Okay. So the motion, and unless anyone really needs to speak now, we'll put this motion.
I'd like to speak, but...
Okay. I'll put the current the motion as it stands, and then so you're speaking on the right motion.
I want to speak to the motion.
Could you just read it?
Yeah. So that a report come forward to the Hobart City Council on the national position of independent panels determining non-delegated planning decisions on housing.
That's it.
Like an information report.
Yeah, fine.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yes, I rise to speak against this motion as amended by Alderman Thomas, accepted in by Alderman Zuko.
From a suggestion from Alderman.
Yeah, but I just a couple of things. I think what Councillor Coates has said just represents the beauty of planning. What I love about planning is that there are so many ways to interpret how things, what things mean, how discretions are read, and we see that from developers, we see that from representors. So, it's a beautiful thing, planning, I've got to say. I've probably been at it for too long.
Mm-hmm.
To suggest that we should not, and I know this has changed, but essentially the focus, as I read it from Alderman Zuko, was to try and look at how council and elected members moves away from representing their communities, the communities of representors and the communities of developers. And I think the planning scheme or the planning system that we have in Tasmania is a pretty special thing. So I think that we have that chance to reflect our community's concerns, whether the building is too high. You know, it might have a discretion of a couple of stories, or, you know, it might have a discretion of disallowing light coming into a building next door. But we are there to represent those concerns that are provided to us. Whether they would be heard by another body, I'm not sure. And of course, anything that is appealed, any decision of this council is appealed, and planning professional planners do look at that. So and look at it in full detail. So, you know, I think we have a win-win-win situation with planning. We have a situation where we are there to represent our community. We're not experts, none of us, or apart from, I think, Councillor Harvey, you're the only one here with a planning degree.
Wouldn't say I was an expert though, but
Or
I do have one of those.
Planning degree?
I must have.
Got all the other degrees.
Oh, okay. There you go. So, I mean, I don't mean to.
But he did this in Melbourne.
No, let's allow Councillor Burnett to finish her intervention.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. But I just have a question through you to the Director. I don't know, Director Mr Noy, if you can actually answer this, but how many of the development applications for housing, for homes or apartments, are done at officer delegation, and how many as a percentage roughly actually get to committee or council?
It's approximately 95% of the applications are dealt with at officer level, and then, you know, you've got the 1 in 20 comes to committee and council for determination.
Thank you. So essentially, even if they're cut and pasted, and planning's difficult for people if they don't know anything about planning, or, you know, it's like a foreign language to a lot of people. It's very difficult to get your head around. Having that ability to talk with elected members, I think, is such a beauty of our planning system, and it shouldn't be tampered with.
Okay, Alderman Brackus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I think I'd be interested to see what a report like this will come back to us. We, and taking on board what the Deputy Lord Mayor said about the nature of planning, we, I've been on this council approaching a full term now, and we, I think myself, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, the only ones, that attended a bunch of seminars or classes or whatever you would call them, that outlined your roles and duties as councillors and outlined how the planning system works. And it was made pretty clear on day one that when you're acting as a planning authority, you take your politician hat off and you put your statutory planning hat on, and that's why the council acting as a planning authority is read out at the beginning of meetings that are assessing planning, and the reason for that is we're not to be making these decisions on a political basis. And I'll take the point that the deputy made, that we don't, we do hear representations from members of the community, and many times those representations will raise points that are relevant to the issue, and might sway how somebody will make their decision on an issue. But at the same time, very, very often, and I'd distinguish between a member of the community raising giving their feedback or responding to consultation on an application, and lobbying. And I think they're two different things. And what we sometimes see, especially with larger applications, is, as was said, the cut and paste media campaigns on one side or against a application, and with the intention of not informing elected members as to the concerns, but trying to pressure them into making a decision. And we have heard on this council, you know, the comments that have said, look, I agree that this complies with the provisions, but I'm not comfortable with it, so I'll vote against it, and words to that effect. It would be good if we can have a system of planning, and not just for housing, but I think housing is obviously the big issue that we're facing as a council, but it would be good to have a system where applications that come forward don't face the risk of being heavily politicised, like many are. Not every decision that we have, but there are so many applications that we have a petition for or against an application, or media campaigns against a application or for an application. So I would be very interested to see what this report would come back with. Because if it comes back and there's nothing that we can find that is better than the system that we currently have, then sure. But if this can suggest, or this can put forward a alternative methodology that would be an improvement on the system that we have, and take the politics and depoliticise the nature of planning, then I think that is for the best. I think councils are in a difficult position because we are elected to represent our community, as the deputy says, but then we are then expected to make decisions apolitically on planning matters, and I think that puts us all in a difficult situation, and we do always spend some time trying to tread that line. So look, I'll leave it there. I'd be in support of this. I think the worst is that we'll come back and say that what we have currently is the best thing, but I'm not convinced that that's the case.
Okay, if there's no further... Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. I acknowledge some of the points that have been made, and I do agree that when we went to this seminar or workshop when we were first elected, we were told that when we do look at the planning matters, we take off that hat and put the planning authority hat. I quite accept that, and we all try and do that, I think, with all good intentions. None of us come here during that particular space, in the planning authority space, to intentionally politicize things. You know, we want to look at it as independently and as closely as we can, the way we understand it. I also acknowledge we don't have the expertise in planning, but it is my understanding that we have advice given to us by planners from our staff. We go outside and get advice from others, and then we read that and then make the particular judgment based on our particular discretion, the way we interpret it. So I think you know, those points can be rebutted. I also agree very strongly with the fact that what Councillor Harvey brought to us, there is a system in place, and it will come through that particular system and process, and I would support that. For me, it is important that when I sit as a planning authority member with that hat on, that I don't only look at one piece of information. I am open to all the information that's given to us, and like in law, the same thing happens. You know, you have these different interpretations, different ways of looking at it, and a number of people come to different conclusions. So this is the way I see it. It is the right of the community. We live in a democracy. And if they don't agree, we reject it, it goes to appeal. So all those systems are in place. And therefore I'm quite comfortable with that, taking into account what Councillor Harvey has said to us, that there is in motion a particular process in place. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll put the motion from Alderman Zuko, seconded by Alderman Barakis.
I can ask them to sum up. Or?
It's all right, Lord Mayor, I'm not going to sum up.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
Show of hands, all those in favour.
Zuko, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
Against.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor. That's lost Lord Mayor, 5 votes to 6.
Okay. Moving on now to item 11 is monthly building statistics. Alderman Barakis.
I think it's item 10, Lord Mayor.
What was that, sorry?
Item
11.
We've done item 2.
Oh, it's double listed as item 10. Apologies. I'll move that, Lord Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Burnett. Any discussion? No discussion. I'll just note very quickly that in the 12 months to February 22, planning applications were up, the value of them was up $80 million in the year. So a good result of a council approving lots of value planning permits with good value.
You must have went to the different school that I went to, Lord Mayor. I don't read it like that. The value may have gone up, but the number of dwellings have gone down. The value. So we all know that the building material cost has gone up. Availability of engineers and builders and concrete.
Planning. Sorry.
Yes, but there are permits. But when you put how much you're going to spend on your property in your planning permit, you'll have to have an estimate of how much it's going to cost you. That's what we're referring to, aren't we? We're not referring to the cost of the permit. We're referring to the estimated cost of the building. So I'm correct. Thank you.
All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Monthly planning statistics. Seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor.
I'll move that, Lord Mayor.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Alderman Barakis, you have a motion, which is item number 13.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll move that.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, in recent times, the City of Hobart, through the CEO, commissioned a survey to seek feedback from the business sector and the community. It returned to us a report card, you could say, on how council is performing in the eyes of the community on various issues. Most of the metrics, I think, were actually more positive than I was expecting. Most of them were excellent, good, very good. But there were three that were rated as negative, and I think they were far below everything else, and that being planning, which we've just discussed in some length, traffic management, and parking availability and affordability. Of these, the parking one was marked as the greatest issue. I think the most number of people that responded to the survey rated that as the biggest issue. And the rating was very poor by the community and extremely poor by the business sector. The survey that was commissioned, I think, has done its job. It's highlighted where we're performing well. It's highlighted where we perhaps falling behind and need to do better. We've heard that now. I think it's now incumbent on us to listen and act now that we've heard, and actually do something about it. I think I'm not the only one that's been told by people, but told by business owners that parking issues are affecting their business, or talking to people or seeing comments online and emails being sent in that parking availability or parking costs have been the cause of them deciding not to come into town to do business and to go elsewhere. I think, and just to preempt some of the comments that might be made in this debate, this shouldn't be taken to mean that I don't, or anyone that supports this motion doesn't support working to improve, working to incentivise increased take-up of public transport and the effectiveness of public transport or active transport. For many people, I think that would be to make those modes of transport more accessible and more practical, I think will be good, not just for them, but for those that do use cars, as it will reduce congestion. The issue is these things aren't mutually exclusive. We do need to do that work, but it is inappropriate to say that focusing on one thing means that we can't do another. What we want to do is to increase the practical choices people have to get around this city. The reality is, for numerous reasons, whether it's families, mothers, people that require a car for work, public transport, active transport isn't a practical option for them. And the last statistics I've seen have about 3/4 of people in southern Tasmania requiring a car as their primary form of commute. I know that even reducing the number of cars on the road by 10% would effectively make congestion as if it was all the time during public holidays. So there is still work to do there, but we need to, I think, reflect on our role here, Lord Mayor. That is, we have been elected to represent the community, we've been elected to serve the community. We haven't been elected to tell people what's good for them. We are here to serve them, and they've been pretty clear, both through public engagement in all the various different forums, but also in this survey that we've paid for and the council's commissioned. And there are a large number of people that are unhappy, are very frustrated with the our planning options at the moment. You look at the issues that have been happening in North Hobart, for example. You listen to people talk about parking in the city. These are serious issues for many people, because it dictates whether or not they're going to come into the city, and it dictates how they get around the city. So I do know a large factor of that is just the availability of parking and the supply of parking. Another factor that has been discussed already is perhaps there is ways that we can make our existing stock of parking more efficient, more efficiently use them, and make them more available.
30 seconds.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Make them more available to people that need them when they need them. So look, I'm hoping that actually, can I request an extra minute, Lord Mayor?
An extra.
Just 1 minute.
Moved by Alderman Zucker, seconded by Alderman Thomas. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We have existing parking. We need to work on ways to improve the way that parking is used, and that's another aspect. And then there is the issue of affordability, which has been raised, and there was quite a significant jump in recent times that I think has frustrated and impacted on a large number of people. Lord Mayor, I know there is some work already being done in this space, but and that has been noted in the officer's report. I do think it is, however, important that we do bring this together, and I think we need to send a signal to the community that we have heard them, that we are acting on that, and we are bringing this forward as a matter to be acted on rapidly. It is affecting people's ability to get around the city. That's what we're hearing from them. And I do think it is appropriate that we do consider this as a matter of importance, and I don't think that detracts from any of the work that's being already done. I think it in fact complements it and brings it together in one place, so we can actually make some decisions, and we can make them soon, and we can see what we can do for short-term solutions and long-term solutions to actually help
15 seconds.
that access grow for the city. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, I do now work for most of my profession now in Glenorchy. Sadly, part of my campus did burn down last week. But I now do travel to Glenorchy. And I think I would encourage anyone to get out of the CBD, and as most of us are inner city livers, and see the extent of traffic coming in and out of our city. I can see why people would choose to go to Glenorchy, Clarence or Kingborough to do their shopping. I was down at Kingston a week ago. I couldn't believe the extent of free under shelter parking. It was extensive under the, I don't know what they call it, but around the Purity supermarket down, it was undercover. It was easy parking. The parking spaces were big. I can understand why people keep out of the city for parking. But I also know that the hospital is the major hospital. All the hospitals are centred in Hobart. There are many significant schools in Hobart. Most of the public servants are in Hobart, and many of the low-paid workers come to Hobart or come from the outer suburbs of our city to come to Hobart to go to work. And the constant feedback I have, and I'm a greenie from way back. I've been, before a couple of these people were born, we were trying to encourage inner city cycleways and rivulet tracks. The Green Party has not had a monopoly in my time on good things to improve transport. But I think there is a real perception problem of Hobart now saying, let's stop the cars from coming into Hobart, let's stop them parking, let's increase the fees so we encourage them to not park in our city. And that perception is nonsense. It should be addressed. We are not a capital city like Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane or Perth or Adelaide. We are a small provincial town that has low-paid workers, that paying for parking like they pay here in Hobart is an impost on them, and I think we should start thinking that we are an important provincial town and not always compare with Melbourne or Sydney. Now, I had to go to the Hobart Council Centre the other day. There were 2 people there trying to work out silly parking meters, and I tried, and another person who was with me tried to get them to work. We couldn't. It turned out to be 2 people from India who had only been in Australia a month. Their English was poor. They'd got a huge fine because they didn't read the sign or couldn't read the English, and they were there trying to somehow get the parking meters to work so they could go in and pay their fine. I couldn't believe it, and the person right beside me said, my son was going to an expo on the Australian Defence Force, and I'm going in to pay a fine as well. And I said, well, contact the leadership of the council and say these are real problems. Parking is a real problem in the city of Hobart. It is expensive, and you can see when we offer the regatta ground for free parking, it is chock-a-block full of people. That demonstrates to me there is a lot of people who are very price sensitive, and I think when we have our budget discussions, we have to address, should we reduce the parking? Should we give free parking for the first half an hour on parking meters? Some ways that we are saying, we know you're suffering out there, we know that we are, in the meantime, before public transport gets better, or bicycles or scooters, all those means of transport that we're trying to encourage, get to better. Can I have, yeah, someone's about to say I'm running out of time. No, I'm fine. Okay. We have a perception. I know, and the CEO would probably agree. In fact, she got this survey going, and I commend the CEO for doing this. And this is a baseline study, really. It is sad that the 3 things that are poor, very poor.
30 seconds now.
Can I have extended of a minute? Thanks.
Moved by Alderman Brucker, seconded by Councillor Dutta. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously.
The 3 things we often have great ideological discussions in this council: transport, parking, and affordability are poor and very poor, and planning is very poor as well. So the perception in the community, we get parks, which is great because the Parks Committee I belong to and the chair, I think that's fantastic.
The brilliant chair.
But, brilliant, absolutely, make a difference. But those 3 things we should be starting to concentrate and say, hey, let's put our ideological utopian views to one side and say, what are the real things we've got to do to get rid of the perception, and some of it is perception, but a lot of it is reality as well, about the parking availability and affordability, because we're getting beaten hands down by the cities around us. Absolutely, absolutely beaten. And we used to be a premier retail and destination. We're not anymore. We are, if I have to go to the hospital with a sick child or an elderly parent, I will force myself to go and find a parking spot. I will force myself to go into if I can get into one of the multi-storey car parks that are nearby, but I don't like it. And I think we should make it really, really easy. So we are a friendly, at the moment while there's transitioning to different transport modes, we should make it easy, and we should have a perception. And we know that other provincial cities like this in Australia are doing this. They can't do it in Melbourne and Sydney or Brisbane or Perth or Adelaide because they are big cities. We are not a big city. We're not a world city. We're a provincial town, and we should recognise that the community here is much more sensitive to things like parking and transport. So I welcome that and the courage that Alderman Barak has put this motion before us, and I hope his motion gets support tonight.
Alderman Thomas.
First of all, through you to the CEO, when do we expect this major work to be returned to us?
Through you, Lord Mayor, there's actually 2 reports on their way to Council. One is in response to the previous petition, and this is regarding a sort of full synopsis or a comprehensive report with a synopsis of what's been done to date in terms of parking intervention with all of the various research and reports that have been done previously. There's also a second report that will come that's in relation to the Central Hobart Precinct Plan, the North Hobart Precinct Plan as well, that we're about to commence. And we'll be looking at options for a broader parking policy going forward. And that's something that I've articulated, as you'll see, in the officer response in regards to this notice of motion. So those reports are coming to Council soon, but it's fair to say the broader parking policy element is going to be recommended as part of the overarching work that we're doing from a land use planning perspective.
So another question, just a clarification. So when can we expect a final treatise on this issue?
Through you, Lord Mayor, in terms of the final policy around parking, it will be informed by that land use planning work that I'm talking about. So it's a joined up response. So that won't be before October. Through you, Lord Mayor. However, the other report summarising the current state and also talking through some short to medium term actions will be forthcoming in the next probably 6 to 8 weeks,
Okay.
Lord
Well,
Mayor.
thanks for those answers. Look, we're only involved with efficient and effective governance. So my issue is to obviously support well-intentioned motions, but to what degree, and I'm not asking this as a political question, when you first got this motion, did you think, oh my God, this is going to ruin what we're doing? Is it going to actually help? Does this motion help what we're doing? If these reports are coming back soon, does it help, or does it really just take you off the main game?
Through you, Lord Mayor, this is certainly something that is going to be delivered to you at a point in time, as I've outlined earlier, and that's certainly something I had spoken with Alderman Barakis about, as I do with all drafters of motions, Lord Mayor.
I'm not sure whether I'm still asking questions or not, but I will again. If we were to approve this motion, in the view of the administration, would this report come back earlier than the soon-to-come other reports, and would it be of any value? I'm only asking as an administration.
Through you, Lord Mayor, I'm not going to comment on its value other than to say that it won't interrupt the course of the report being, I guess, presented to Council. But having said that, it doesn't affect what is coming forward to you. So in other words, it's a notice of motion. As a notice of motion, it doesn't add value to the work that's currently underway, Lord Mayor.
Yeah, I guess that's my concern, is that you've got this detailed work coming. It is coming reasonably soon, one part of it anyway, and we've almost got a bevy of officers somewhere. One lot's working on the bigger report, the longer term report. The other one is working on the one that's coming pretty soon. And then there could be a third one working on this motion. And I'm worried about that being as an effective operation of our council, to be quite honest.
Councillor Sherlock.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Look, I think I would have to agree with Alderman Thomas's comments, and also the comment made by the CEO. Just specifically to, this motion, perhaps it doesn't actually add value to what we're already doing. So we look at the Central Hobart Precinct Plan, which is currently underway. We look at the North Hobart Precinct Plan, which is also underway. And then we look at this motion. And point 1 says, note the community and business satisfaction surveys, positive feedback, etc. Noted. Number 2, further notes that the provision has the most negative survey responses, extremely poor about parking. Noted. So I think those point number 1 and point number 2, I'm sure we'll all happily note it and we'll go, yes, that's wonderful. But when it comes to number 3, I have really great difficulty in supporting that. So I would really appreciate if we split it up, because I'm happy to say yes noted 2 times, but I'm not really convinced that we actually need an urgent report that is already doing the stuff that this particular motion is asking for. And I think there's some really wonderful and beautiful sentiments that Alderman Baracus actually raised. I think that Alderman Briscoe as well, when he's talking about the ideological utopian views that we're talking about, I think it's really irrelevant to this motion, to be honest. And it's irrelevant because this is seeking a report on something that we're already doing a report on. And it just this particular motion actually reminds me of something I think that Alderman Zuko and Alderman Baracus said last week. Is it an election year? This is what I see when I look at this motion. I see individuals knowing what the process is, individuals knowing that, look, all this stuff is already coming back to us. Perhaps the community doesn't actually know that, and so assuming that the community doesn't actually know these processes that are already in place, almost jumping on something to make yourself look like you're doing something for the community, but it's in effect not really actually doing that, because our officers are doing that, and it almost undermines the process already. And then I end up thinking to myself, these are just serial motion bringers. Of things that we're of issues that we're already doing. We're already doing it. And so I would really like it, Lord Mayor, if the motion was split up, 1, 2 and 3, because I'm happy to note things, but I'm not happy to waste officer time on doing something that we're already doing. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
So just for a note, Councillor Baracus, would you, just so we know, are you happy to do that?
Lord Mayor, I'm happy to do that, and Councillor Sherlock is the seconder, so I think we might assume her position on it.
Sorry.
Do we want to split? We didn't.
Mind what order I go in. He got the jump this time on me.
Lord Mayor. In the debate on whether or not we're going to give planning look at planning on a report on housing, it was mentioned about the community. This is work that we've done through the community, and it's come forward on what the community's priorities are. I understand that what's been said about all these reports and all these things coming forward, but isn't this actually re-emphasising the importance of the surveys we've been doing with the community and saying to them, well, we're going to listen to what you're saying and we're going to act as soon as possible on what you're saying? Because if we're not, then we might as well not even bother with planning. We might as well just say to them, yeah, look, I understand you don't want the 2 stories, but I'm really busy at the moment. I really couldn't be bothered doing it, and I'll worry about it later. Because that's what we're saying. Now, I was at the workshops and all that, and I was actually quite shocked on some of the concerns that the community had. And if we're not going to listen to that, and not going to act on those problems, especially their serious problems, because I take on board what Alderman Briscoe says. Now, unless no one's moving outside of the city of Hobart, because I do go to Glenorchy very often. I do go to Eastlands often. I just got off a plane this morning at 9 o'clock from Melbourne. And I travel quite extensively around the place. Hobart, and I've got to say, even people you bump into in Glenorchy, they go, oh, you Alderman Zuko? And I normally say, no, I'm his twin brother. Because I worry about what they're going to say to me. They say, I don't know what's wrong with your place. I don't know what's wrong with Hobart. I don't go there anymore because I can't find anywhere to park. Exactly. That happens constantly. So if you've got an issue, look at what the state government has done. There's an issue at the moment because of the price of petrol's gone through the roof. Oh look, let's wait until such time XYZ happens and we might put free buses on. But they didn't. They just went bang, put free buses on. Let's try and ease the problem. This morning on my way back from the airport, at 8:30 a.m. I didn't get caught up in traffic at the far end. I actually drove right through because action was taken. I actually, if you recall, those members of the Finance Committee that were at Finance the other day, I brought up quite a number of matters that are still sitting on the council agendas, on the to-do list, in regards to a petition reduction to on-street parking fees. This is a petition that was put forward on the 11th of the 10th, 2021. What is it now? And it hasn't even gone to committee. If you look at other matters here, there's the Condell car park. It's been there since 2018. All these matters here in finance are parking related. We have a car park at Lafroy Street that was sitting somewhere in the coffers of someone's office for 2 years before it got acted upon, and it's costing this council thousands of dollars. To my point of view, a report will bring us forward with information that will assist this council in saying, okay, can we work on that component first? It's like coming to a restaurant and saying, well, you know, I want the cup of coffee but not the sugar at the moment. You know, you've got to look at every scenario on its merits. We have an issue with parking in this city. Blind Freddie knows that. And if we don't act like we say we want to act with our planning hat on, then we're actually not doing our job as elected members for those members of the community that partook in the survey, put their matters forward, and we just say, "Oh, bugger you, we're not interested because we're going to just wait until we can build Mount Everest," because we wait and wait and wait. I totally respect what the work the officers are doing now, but there are some things you've got to say, okay, that little component needs to be acted upon now. And this reminds me, and I tell you what it reminds me of, is a motion I put forward in
time, Alderman
well, can I just finish this sentence? A motion I put forward in 2017 to look at how we can assist the housing market by making deals with developers, and it ended up going into a bigger group of work and never got done. So sometimes it's best to look at the simple things.
Sorry, I just have a question, Lord Mayor. Just wanted to clarify, when we had the North Hobart issue with parking, did we act really quite urgently in hood parking meters? Did we do that?
Oh, a couple of council members.
We listened to the community. So that's yes, right? And secondly, yes.
The officers won't
thank you. And just secondly, the parking supply and affordability issue that's been wanting to be dealt with by this motion, is that actually underway as part of the Central Hobart precinct plan?
Yes, it is.
Lord Mayor, that's correct.
Any further discussion? Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, it's a very interesting debate, and I think it's a good motion that's been brought forward. Look, the more I've been listening to debate, the more of it I'm thinking the motion I'm looking at is not necessarily the one that I'm hearing the discussion about per se, or at least my understanding of it. Look, everyone sort of speaks, number one, number two, I think it's fine. Number three, when it calls to urgent initiatives to increase supply and affordability, I guess I go back to the provenance of where this has come from. So this has come from the officers have correctly identified that it's important for us to go out and survey the community to find out what are the issues of concern, what are the aspects that they think we're doing well, not well, need improvement. And when we got that information back, it's very clear. It's very clear, and obviously we don't need to read reports there in front of us, but parking is one of them. So look, out of that, I think it's entirely appropriate, us as a governance group, having had that evidence given to us by the officers, go back to them and say, well, look, this is clearly the area of concern. Look, come back to us if you've got any initiatives in regards to supply and affordability. We'd love to hear about it. Anything urgent. Look, it's not going to solve a problem overnight. We know that you're doing a whole lot of strategic plan, and we don't want you to somehow cease or prevent that from happening. But, you know, we can see there's this pain point. We've got the evidence. We'd love for you to come back to us with some initiatives. And look, the initiatives might be that we've identified that when you go to have a coffee with a friend at Salamanca, your coffee costs you $5 and your car parking costs you $5, and maybe that's not quite right. So in terms of affordability, an initiative might be, look, we could lower that price temporarily. Or it might come back and say, look, we've got on-street parking up of a domain, but everyone parks sideways against the side of the road. Maybe if we just turn the cars 90 degrees and we all had no's, would increase availability at there 50%. And so look, in my mind, the motion that we're voting on is we're asking the officers of this council to come back to us with some initiatives. And they might come back and say, look, we can only identify 3, or we've got these 10. And ultimately it's up to us to then say the appetite and what are the costs involved, is it worth taking that up on? And you know, when I asked for an urgent one in response for some initiatives, I'd be expecting this to come back reasonably soon. The strategic stuff that's already underway is underway. It's happening. I have every confidence in the officers doing a brilliant job around that, and that'll hopefully come up with some longer term solutions and some solutions that will fit into, you know, overall long-term strategic objectives of a city. But what I'm voting on here, and what I can see in front of me, is just some short-term initiatives to say, ultimately, community, we've listened to, and look, we're going to make some little tweaks. And you know, I along with I imagine others, went to quite a few of the workshops last week, and if there was one theme that was consistent through, I would say all of them, not quite because it didn't come up in the innovators one, but it was the parking and the accessibility around Hobart. I went to the hospitality and tourism workshop, and I would say almost every single person raised and agreed that this was one of their pain points. And I'm thinking, oh, a lot of visitors don't need to come into the CBD, they don't have a car, they don't do that commute. And you know, the hotel operators would talk about the fact that they're struggling to get their staff to be able to come to shifts because the staff can't actually access work. You know, they've got a shift that starts early in the morning, ends late at night, and public transport isn't an option for them, and they're finding that they're being barred from being able to come to work. You know, we had, you know, the hospitality retailers sort of saying, oh, you know, it's a huge issue for us, and yeah, it really did strike me as sort of anecdotal compelling how much agreement there was around all these participants saying, look, this is just killing us. And so look, when I read this, I seem to think we got the evidence. The officers have come to us and said, here's your pain points in the city. Us as a governance group should have the ability to go, look, great, we agree, we can see it. It's not up to us to sort of come up. We'd love for you guys to come back to us with something. And they may not. It's a hard job sometimes to try and come up with a quick fix. But, I mean, I'm hoping that if we ask for some sort of way to increase parking supply and some sort of way to increase affordability or decrease unaffordability, look, there might be 1 or 2 little quick wins we can get. And I think that's all number 3 is seeking. An urgent report identifying some initiatives. It shouldn't, in my mind, in any way compromise our overall land use planning strategy, the Central Hobart Precinct strategy, the North Hobart Precinct. That's much more strategic, heavy-hitting, long-term stuff. What this is about is us saying, we've got some evidence, let's act on it, and let's see if we can get some sort of tweak. Thank you.
A question through you to the General Manager, Chief Executive, sorry. The first report you've got coming back, the one that's in here in about 5 weeks' time, is that going to have this type of information, in other words, short-term fixes?
Through you, Lord Mayor, it will raise those issues that we can do in the sort of short to medium term, with the broader, as I said earlier, parking policy being dealt with as part of a joined up strategy as a result of the Central Hobart Precinct Plan and also North Hobart Precinct Plan. Lord Mayor, one of the challenges is that if you take the parking policy out of the broader land use whole of city strategy, you essentially get unintended consequences, and that's why, from an officer perspective, we've said in the officer report response here to the notice of motion that we see that as being embedded in that strategic work.
We'll come back.
Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Again to the CEO. So just a question of the Central Hobart Precinct Plan, because that's used as, to me, used sometimes without saying negative, sort of excuse that we don't do anything, but for a while. Is that firstly, is that a planning strategic document?
Yes, Lord Mayor, it is. It's essentially a structure plan which guides future land use and development, Lord Mayor.
So, so the second part of the question is that urgent parking initiatives would not fit in with that strategic overall view. So it's 4 or 5 weeks away before we consider it as a workshop, and then it will come to council and then go out to public, whether it's a planning document. So it doesn't have a list of, these are things we can do now.
Lord Mayor, sorry for the confusion. So essentially I'm talking about 2 very separate reports. The report in response to the petition, which is the petition that Alderman Marty Zuko mentioned earlier, that is the report that I'm working on that deals with the short to medium term matters, Lord Mayor, not the overarching parking policy, which is what I'm recommending we develop as a penultimate piece of work that comes out of the strategic planning underway.
Yeah, it's sort of in your, sorry, to just clarify that correct more, in your officer thing you do not mention the petition.
That's correct.
You don't mention the petition, right?
Harvey?
I'll be brief, Lord Mayor. If I submitted a notice of motion and then had a conversation with the CEO who informed me that we're doing it already, and then I kept submitting it, and then I got a response that said basically we're doing that already, common sense would tell me that I will just withdraw my notice of motion. And that's what I suggest happens here tonight, that we just ask Alderman Barakas to withdraw this, because clearly we're doing the work already, and this is a bit of a distraction, and we could have avoided a whole debate here tonight had that common sense come to the fore early in the piece and the motion was withdrawn. So it looks like we're going to have to vote on all 3 items before us, or I suggest you could just withdraw it because you know this work is already coming. And I look forward to those final reports. And I would much rather have a substantial strategic approach than another distraction of having another report that will duplicate some work or might lead to the unintended consequences as has been mentioned by the CEO. So I won't support part 3, and I'd rather the whole motion just get withdrawn to save us, I don't know, a few seconds.
Councillor Dutta?
Thank you, Chair. I do take note of all the comments that has been made, and I want to just refer to the motion. Now, firstly, the motion has 3 parts, as already been stated. 1, note, 2, note, and 3, that we need an urgent report. Now, I do go along in this particular instance with Councillor Sherlock and agree with her that those points are quite valid. The second thing that the motion mentions is that the rationale, and the rationale states very clearly, it's based on the survey results, and therefore we need to do something. Now, this has already been taken into account. You don't need a survey report because, again, in the rationale it says we've had this problem for a number of years. So the survey is not telling us anything new. The survey is simply endorsing that particular record that we have. The other part of the rationale is saying this, that the issue of parking availability, long-standing issue, with the roadblock to real action being political rather than organizational and financial. Now, that rationale, there's no evidence. To make a claim of that nature, it would be good to have evidence to say, which elected members use this as a political tool to block it. Now, I can't see any evidence in there, therefore I take that as a subjective comment. There is a rationale 3 here as well. It is time for the council to hear, to listen, and to act. I am sure we have heard, we have listened, and we have acted. Take the classic example of North Hobart. We did. It took us a few weeks, but we did. It took us a few months, but we did. It took us years, but we did. It's very easy for us to say, no, it took us weeks or months, but we did. We took action. There was a process set in place Some of us felt that's a process we need to follow, and then eventually decided on it. So we have heard, we have listened, and we have acted. Now, the third point is, there is a staff response to this motion. And the staff response is simply saying that the supply and affordability is being considered. Now, having learned English as a second language, we were told that there are tenses. And what I read here is this is a present participle. It is a continuous tense. To me, it is saying they are being considered. They are doing it. They are doing it. That is the point. It's not my statement. It is the staff who are qualified who are doing this work. And so, the final comment that I make here in my conclusion is this. Now, again, it was mentioned when I brought the motion 2 weeks ago about the Battery Point walk. No doubt statements were made, and I usually don't take that particular line of approach. But the statements were made.
We are not talking about the boardwalk here in this debate.
No, that's not a point of order, I don't think.
Oh, isn't it?
We're not talking about the boardwalk.
No, I think it's the thing about political, this being election time.
Lord Mayor, I haven't finished. There is a comma in there. It's not a full stop. There's a comma. And I was simply referring to that when I brought that motion up, I was accused, or the statement was made, it's election year. Now, so all this is it appears to me, it's a very populist issue.
What are you saying, that your motion was...
Point of order, Lord Mayor, interrupting. No, point of order. I'd like you to rule on it, please, Lord Mayor.
Don't call out, no,
not to my... Don't, I will stop interjecting.
Thank you.
Yes, but someone was pointing to me like this and telling me something.
Correct, that's inappropriate.
That's inappropriate.
Inappropriate behaviour.
Point of order, please, Lord Mayor. I'd like you to rule on, because Alderman Briscoe is interrupting.
Yes,
thank you.
Please stop interrupting. Thank you.
I hope you have the same...
A point of order again, Lord Mayor. Alderman Briscoe is interrupting.
Let's be consistent.
Point of order again, Lord Mayor.
I'd
like you to rule on it.
Everyone else doesn't.
Councillor Dutta, please continue your intervention.
Thank you. Now, the conclusion I'm making is this, that, if I was accused and the impression was given that the motion was there because it's a political year, election year, and I suppose statement has already been made. So any motion we're going to bring, I've got to be very careful, I think, that we look at it, what the staff is saying. They want to look at it from a holistic point of view. And for me, that is very important as far as the report and the recommendation of the staff is concerned to us. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yeah, I won't rabbit on too much, Lord Mayor, but I'd like to make some points around how much I value those businesses, restaurants, wholesale, all sorts of commercial operators who work in the city, who have run their businesses out of our city. I think they do a fabulous job. And unfortunately, what I heard around the table tonight was not talking up our city, and I think that's really damaging when we as a council broadcast to the world, and we're not even talking up our city. So I mean, it just really disappoints me that we hear that, and it's not the first time that we've heard that around this council table. So I'd like to invite everybody into the city, and we have a unique city. We can't compare it to Glenorchy. We can't compare it to Clarence. We can't even compare it to Kingborough. This is a unique shopping experience, and it's not to deny that there is that some people have difficulty with parking. But I'd just like to ask a question through you, Lord Mayor. And I'm not sure if Mr Noy can answer this. Sorry, Mr Noy, that might be a new responsibility for you. But can you, do you know what sort of vacancy rates we have in our car parks, both on-street and off-street parking? And we can just talk about the CBD.
Yeah, look, sorry, I don't have these figures.
Mr. Noy,
I've got an old report.
That's today, but not this one, unfortunately.
look, it would be nice to have that circulated because, you know, I think that what we'll get from any sort of parking review is a look at how we strategically try and get people into car parking spots, and how we get that information out across to our community and visitors. So I can't support this motion. It is nice to note a couple of things, but we do have these things in train. You know, we know we have these things in train. We know, and I take Alderman Zuko's point about a response to the petition. You know, it's really important that we get timely responses when we can. But when we're looking at strategic issues such as land use and getting to use that land by whatever way, we need to do this. We need to do the strategic work, and we have, I know, certainly through our COVID couple of years, our responses to parking was really swift. So, you know, we should be commended as a council for working with our community, listening to our community, and responding well. I think parking is always going to be a difficult one to solve because nobody wants to pay necessarily for parking. I don't know how many of us around this table pay for parking, but in this city, but nobody wants to pay for parking. Nobody wants to pay parking fines either. And I note on one of our next reports that we're actually having an increase in fine revenue. So that's a whole another issue, and important for us to be able to deliver our services. And just a note to those who visit other areas like Glenorchy. I worked in Glenorchy when I was working as a podiatrist last year. For most weeks of the year I would go to Glenorchy. I'd usually carpool or I'd catch a bus, and it delivers you straight into the CBD. What could be better?
Further discussion? Yes, thank you. It has been a bit disappointing, some of the debate around the table. I am also agree with Deputy Lord Mayor about people sort of talking down the city. I shop in the city, I go out in the city, I meet friends in the city. I really think that in terms of an experience of an interesting, vibrant place to shop, eat, meet friends, do things, there's nothing in Hobart that beats the Hobart CBD. There's close to 7,000 businesses in the CBD. It's up 5% since between the most recent data shows that it's up about 5% of businesses in the CBD. That's more than double any of the other areas. So there's more choice in the CBD. The nighttime economy, the restaurants, the bars, the cafes, the cultural experiences in the city, you know, that is what we have, and we should feel very proud of, and we should talk it up. And you know, the city is very vibrant in many respects. We've got the lowest vacancy rate of any capital city in the country. We've got businesses increasing, and the nighttime economy, jobs and economy, size of the nighttime economy is growing. So, you know, it is really disappointing to see that kind of talking down of the city, the Hobart CBD. We are unique, and parking is going to be more of a challenge as Hobart changes, as more people live in the city, as there's more hotels, more visitors, more businesses. You know, we can't all necessarily, you know, bring in a car, one person in a car, find a free car park and stay there all day. You know, like, you can't have it both ways. If we want the city to look like Eastlands or Glenorchy, then, you know, then yes, we can do that. But if we don't want the whole place covered in car parks, then it is going to be challenging. We have to be clever about the use of car parks. I do find this kind of, the motion is peppered with some slurs in here and hyperbole. the one that Councillor Dutta mentioned, where he said that the roadblock to real action is political rather than organisational or financial. You know, that's just totally wrong. I sat around the budget, the current parking fees were set by all of us. All of us sat around in budget workshops last year down at the Elizabeth Street Pier, and our staff said to us, you know, we're going to put these fees on, will you back us in? This is what will make the parking system work better in Hobart. They presented us all of the evidence, and we all sat there and said, we will back you in on that. And maybe one or two didn't, but you know, we did actually look at the evidence. And I do want to just also mention a few other facts that aren't mentioned in this motion, but they might be in one of the reports coming up. This is a report we got on sort of COVID parking availability in the city, and it shows that for at least the last 6 months there's been 50% combined off-street occupancy of car parks. So there's only 50% of car parks are actually being used. So there is plenty of off-street parking availability in the city of Hobart. And remember, it's not just us. These are private parking operators as well that are providing a service. So there is plenty of availability for anyone concerned. It's been 50% occupancy since at least October. On parking fees, as I said, we knew they were recommended during the last budget, and 60% of on-street parking bays are $2 to $3 an hour. That's the cheapest of any capital city. As Alderman Briscoe said, we do need to recognise we're a smaller capital city. Also, you know, what people don't often hear about, because elected members aren't out there talking about it, is that we provide 1.3 million hours, free hours per year in our off-street car parks. 1.3 million free hours. No other capital city does that. We also provide $1 million worth of free pensioner parking discounts. So there are many things, and you know, as part of COVID, we've also run free parking days. You know, the sensor program has led to a really fantastic turnover in parking spaces in the CBD, and the parking app, if anyone doesn't have it, I use it all the time. It's fantastic as well. You don't have to deal with meters that, once again, I have to point out, were actually approved by the entire council, the previous council. So, look, I'm happy to wait for... I do think that the administration does need to respond to the petition. I take that. I think that is, you know, that does need to happen soon. But you know, it is a complicated issue, and I'm sure they're putting in solid work. We've also got to recognise that there's a lot happening, and there's been, you know, COVID and budget cuts and all sorts of challenges for the staff doing the best they can to get the work out. So I'm happy with the petition report, which I'm hearing is probably going to come to us in about 5 weeks, which will respond to community concerns about parking fees and availability. So this is not required because we already have the work coming our way. Thank you. All right, so I think there was a proposal to move these separately. Oh, sorry,
Coming up.
Alderman Bristol.
Before I
sorry.
a question of you, Lord Mayor.
Yep.
Those occupancy statistics, is that a full aggregate of the entire city, or does that break down in any way different regions or different areas within the city?
The property council's data on is on. It's produced once a year on vacancy rates. It was on CBDs, so it's on the Hobart CBD, Sydney CBD, Melbourne CBD, Brisbane CBD. Yeah, so it is CBD vacancy rates, commercial vacancy rates.
Okay, thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, we'll touch on a few things because there's a bit to unpack there. Just on the main issue, this is a report, and yes, there is, and it was acknowledged, there is a body of work that is coming back. But the key word in all of this is the urgency of it, and this has been, and I will refute the mischaracterisations that have been made by yourself and the Deputy Lord Mayor. This hasn't been a talking down. The Deputy acknowledged the businesses in our community that do such a great job trading and building up our city. This is a response to what they have said. They're the ones that have said that the provision and availability of parking is extremely poor. This isn't talking down. It's all well and good for us to talk ourselves up and to encourage people to come to this city, and we should definitely do that, but we do need to get real about where we need to improve. That's two different things, and To close your eyes and say everything's good isn't to do a service to anybody, and to acknowledge issues is not to talk the city down. So I'd really strongly refute that. But we have strategic plans that are coming. We have other plans that are coming to us, and the strategic plans and the precinct plan, they are, as was said, holistic, long-term planning, and they've been going on for a long time, Lord Mayor. We've had the precinct plans also touching on housing, and we'll have a holistic view on housing and affordability and planning, but we still see, as we discussed tonight, amendments on short stay and housing that could very well have waited until we had a holistic plan for housing in the city. There's issues where we have long-term planning, and then there's issues where we need to take action. And that's what this is calling forward and bringing forward the timeline to take action on these things. And I don't think anybody is suggesting that we do anything that would conflict with those longer-term strategic plans and land use plans. But when we have things that could be immediately put into effect to ease the burden that many of these people are facing and have said that they're facing, I think it's important that we do that and send the signal that we are doing that. I know that there is the petition, but we do need to show to the city that we are acting on this. We do have existing parking that is being underutilised, and we have parking that's being overutilised, and we can do better in making sure that those parking are more available and more accessible. So the issue is, yes, there is a report, yes, there is work being done, but that is the case with so many things that we discuss as a council. We have housing, we do things on the side while we are preparing a holistic document. We can do things right now that don't conflict with our long-term plans on parking. And just to touch on...
30 seconds.
Am I allowed to get an extension on summary?
I'm not sure on wrapping up. Maybe.
I'll move for it.
Okay. Moved by Alderman Baraka, seconded by Alderman Briscoe for 1 minute. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously.
The comment that Councillor Dutta made, the roadblock to many of the planning decisions, many of the parking decisions that happen on council happen at the political level. And there was an example, and it's not introducing new information because Alderman Zuko raised it, was Condell Place. Before I was even on this council, there was EOIs that were put forward recommending action to be taken on Condell Place. That was mothballed by the council at the time. There's been calls to do stuff in Condell Place, in North Hobart, and there was some action taken in North Hobart, and I'll acknowledge that. But there was calls by the community, by the business community in North Hobart, and by many patrons that go into North Hobart for action to improve the parking supply in that area. And the response was, we had a public meeting, and there was certain elected members that went there to tell people at that meeting that actually, no, you don't need more parking. So look, there is a political opposition or a political resistance to actually doing what needs to be done on this issue, and the result of that is the feedback that we're hearing from the community. Cool. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd encourage everyone to support this motion.
Okay, so we'll put the items one by one. All those in favour of item 1? Aye. Against say no. So is that carried unanimously? Item 2, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 3, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Show of hands, all those in favour.
Alderman Zuko, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakas, Alderman Briscoe.
And against?
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Fox, Alderman Thomas, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor. It's lost Lord Mayor, 4 votes to 7.
Okay, so do people want a break or keep going?
I'll break. Oh, how much is left?
About probably another half an hour or so.
I think we should have a break. We've been going on for 2.5 hours, Lord Mayor.
So we'll people want to have 15 minutes and have something to eat and come back?
Good idea.
Okay, 15 minutes, so 7:45. I'll pass over to Alderman Zuko. He's got item 14.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, I wasn't in position. Lord Mayor, this is delegation to the a number of delegations to the Chief Executive Officer. I say move them all. Lord Mayor, they're basically what normally happens anyway on a regular basis, so it's really nothing new. So.
Second by Alderman Thomas. Any discussion?
Just a question, Lord Mayor, and forgive my ignorance on this. Is this is this re-granting existing permissions, or what's the reason this is here?
Standard process.
Yes.
Yes, there's no change to what's currently in place. It's just updating them with the new structure.
I hate to ask this question.
Alderman Briscoe?
It's probably more of a CEO question over a meal or something, but I'm still not sure of what the functions of each of the new directors do, and are we going to get a list of the actual functions on the ground?
Yes, so thank you for that question, Lord Mayor, and it's certainly something that I was hoping to cover off at our workshop coming up, but we have actually provided quite a bit of information. There has been a summary circulated with all of the new ELT members and an outline of their role and function, so I'm more than happy to recirculate that, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask another question? Yes, I've seen that, but still, for example, I can't remember, I think I rung up two of my favourite directors and they weren't sure. Oh, I haven't got any favourites, by the way. Two directors that I knew quite well, and they were unsure where such a function existed. Like, I was looking for dogs, who controls dogs, and then it was...
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm certainly happy to provide clarity to those members of the team, I think is a matter of priority, but also to reiterate to you very clearly the role and function of each of those new areas. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
And just could I'm sorry, I know it's a later night than we thought, any of us thought would be, but I didn't know which director looked after parking after a great debate we had. So could you clarify that in the new? Thank you. I do now. I think I do know now. I think.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 15 is new policy on competitive neutrality. Alderman Zuko.
Good. Seconded, Lord Mayor.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
On that.
Sorry.
Add one, Debbie.
Yes, Lord Mayor. New policy, competitive neutrality. The Council adopted new policy, competitive neutrality, marked as attachment A. So moved.
Yes, it's already been seconded, Alderman Thomas.
10 minutes ago.
So what do you want to tell us a little bit about it, Alderman Zuko? Very briefly.
No, Lord Mayor, I don't think it's really that important. I remember doing it in finance. It's all right. It's okay.
Any
Take it on to
discussion?
this council meeting.
Any discussion? No? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 16.
Lord Mayor, financial report. At the end of the day, we're looking better than what we were.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Can I ask a question? I suppose the detail is in the report, but it is an important issue that our labour costs have gone up. It appears from the table, $750,000. Have we got a point like saying it's because, or is it a general increase of, something like this? I would have thought would have been predictable because we knew how much increase the staff got. Oh, anyway, there's a question. Can you put it down to one thing, or?
Through you, Lord Mayor, I'm happy to provide further detail to all elected members on that, but Mr Shaw might like to make a comment specifically in regards to the salaries and staff expenses.
Lord Mayor, through you, yes, the increase in labour cost is primarily attributable to the parking business, Alderman Briscoe, and that is contained in the details in the finance report.
I'm sorry about it. Another question. Now we know the person who's responsible for that area, through you, to the CEO, and appropriate. And I refer back to the two Indian students who had dropped off their university assignment to the university and got a huge fine because they couldn't read the English. The English wasn't good. The question is, are our parking officers being more compliance driven? And that's a nice way of saying it. Are they not excusing people who have legitimate reasons? For example, if you can't read a sign because you're newly arrived in Australia. Just so the general question is there a new regime about increasing the amount of fines?
Through you, Lord Mayor, no, there's not a new regime. I will say, though, that as part of the organisational changes, which I will give you some further detail recirculated on, we have split certain elements of the parking business. So we've got the kind of strategic policy end, and then we've got the day-to-day management of parking, which sits within Neil Noy's area, and we actually have got a cultural sort of review going on in regards to that service, and that's certainly something that we'll be looking at to ensure that we're applying appropriate approaches, both in terms of compliance and following through with, you know, the rules and so on and so forth, but also that there is actually a helpful and responsive culture within the team where, you know, information can be provided in a proactive way, you know, when assistance is required with parking meters and so on and so forth. So certainly something we're looking at and has been part of the organisational changes outlined. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Could I speak to the motion now? It is worrying in the time of increased costs to people that we have got an increase of fines of $2 million. Now, from an organisational point of view, I imagine it helps our bottom line, but really out there in the community, $2 million extra in fines, increase from the budget increases, and we've got it. It seems to me that there's something that we should we be lowering our fines so we don't like has been suggested. I think Alderman Zuko suggested that. Have our fines out of kilter with students' income who do get these fines, or people who are from our outlying suburbs who come into the city to work, or they don't come in here to buy goods that are sold at Bunnings anymore because there's no equivalent of Bunnings in the city. So is there a possibility when we have budget discussions, let's see whether there are possibilities of reducing the fines? Because I think there is an important policy issue. If we're going to say, oh, we want to increase the fines and that's going to be a major part of our parking income, I feel ethically that's not correct. It doesn't fit very nicely with me in the sense that we're relying on compliance fines to fund the City of Hobart. I think ethically it doesn't sit very well with me. So the question is, will this be a discussion we can have in our budget meetings that are coming up?
Through you, Lord Mayor, my understanding is that would happen each year, and certainly elected members through the budget process will have an opportunity to discuss that in workshop sessions and also in the chamber, Lord Mayor.
So I wonder if that could be noted by, it doesn't have to be a motion here, but noted that is a particular concern of me and other people around this table. It won't be everyone, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be everyone. But I do worry about the increase in fines because it's coming out of the most vulnerable parts of our community, including students.
Councillor Harvey.
Question just to follow on that theme there. I also note that there's been an increase in fees and charges in car parks. Is this an indication that a lot more people are now coming back to Hobart, through you, Lord Mayor, to the CEO, that we're seeing an increase in people coming back into the city, utilising our car parks, and subsequently we're seeing a return to normal with regard to fines?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm happy for Mr. Short to take it. If you...
Yeah, look, I think it's fair to say we were conservative in our estimate when putting the budget together in relation to revenue because of COVID, and that is correct. We are finding that that was a conservative estimate, and we are getting much greater participation or presence of vehicles and parking in both our multi-storey car parks and on streets. So that's a positive sign in that sense.
In other words, Bill, it's no.
No, well, I guess, Lord Mayor, that answers the question, that we've got more people coming back into Hobart as a result of changes with COVID's. Saw a lot of drop in traffic and a lot of drop in the use of the car parks. And just to reinforce, Alderman Zuko is saying I'm wrong here, but are we seeing more cars coming back into Hobart? Therefore, we're seeing more fines and more use of the car parks.
Who'd like to answer that question?
I can, Lord Mayor, but I'm not allowed to.
Go.
I know. Lord Mayor.
I'd like to know a bit
Lord
more.
Mayor, let's get. Look, the reality is very simple. We have got in the ground sensors now. We are monitoring the car parks far more efficiently than we ever have. Now, I've been advised that there is a time frame that is allowed to in between the time it finishes and the time it gets fined. But I have seen people get people's fines sent to me, which I said, look, don't fight it. 30 seconds after their thing. So that's why we can monitor the whole system so much better.
Sorry, Alderman Zuko, I thought you'd actually tell us a little bit about what was in the report, about why there's more fees and charges in the car parks.
You asked me to answer the question. I'm giving you my answer to the question.
All right. Is it...
Okay.
Alderman Coates. Sorry, Councillor Coates.
Point of clarification, because I was at the Finance Governance Committee meeting, but page 66, it has a table and it goes into a little bit of detail. The two items that we're talking about tonight, so the fines is a 2.149 million increase, and the commentary in there is due to increased parking officer staffing, so higher compliance, possibly assisted with sensors. The other one, 1.382 million, is the fees and charges car parks, and that's higher patronage than originally anticipated, without wanting to make the obvious point. Obviously 2 years ago, a year ago, when you're trying to put together a budget for parking, and we've got this thing called COVID, I hear the comment that they were very conservative. So look, luckily we've come in over budget. Unluckily, this is one area potentially you don't want to be necessarily over budget, because ultimately it's a cost borne by the community.
Thanks for the explanation.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I... Yeah, it is really useful to get this information, and I'm sorry that I didn't read the report, but it sounds as though with the fines, for example, if one of the officers can clarify that it's not like that the fines have been increased, it's just that when the budget was set in July last year, you thought it was going to be less because you thought there'd be less people in the city. So now you've found that there's more, but there's not... Is the amount of fines being issued dramatically $2 million more than has ever happened before, or just more that you expected it to be lower?
Take it on notice.
Yeah, look, sorry, I just don't have that information available. I think budget for fines is around the 5 million mark or 4 million mark, so I don't have the details in relation to the specific.
Hopefully, yeah, I can just go back and read the report.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. No, I think it's important perception, because I think people think, looking at this, that somehow we've actually chosen to increase fines, but it might just be more of a different type of story. Okay, any further discussion? No? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Recreation Committee.
Apologies, Lord Mayor. I should have actually declared conflicts on this one and missed it on the agenda, so I'll have to duck out for this one.
Sure. So Alderman Baracus is leaving, and Alderman Briscoe, if you'd like to speak to this one.
Yeah, thank you. As the chairman, I will. Thank you. I put the motion on the books. The recommendation from the committee.
Councillor Sherlock.
Thank you. Look, the motion came from a response to a petition containing 56 signatures that were presented to the council, calling for the council to remove the dogs on lead signs in Carrington Park and permit dogs off lead in the area. We had quite a good discussion. For some reason, the normal committee members weren't there. We had an interesting, thank you for those people who turned up, appreciate it. We had an interesting discussion. Essentially, if we did do what has been suggested and remove the dogs on lead and have a permit dogs off lead, even if it's a timed part, it would have to go through all the statutory processes of changing the control around dogs in various parks. It's going to happen to all the parks towards the end of the year. So if we started a process as the petitioners have asked now, it would be a very time, as the officer who was answering questions at the committee, it would be time consuming. We have to advertise just for one area, and it's far better if the petitioners believe that they have a good case than to put it in with all the other areas that we have to review anyway towards the end of the year. So it is a process thing. And I know Alderman Thomas said, couldn't we just put a time thing? But even then, yes, that's possible, but they'd have to go through all the statutory processes to change it. So it's far better to leave it when it all gets reviewed towards the end of the year. So the officers also made some comment about it's not appropriate anyway, but because there are nearby off-leads areas in John Turnbull Park. It's far better, I think, to have a motion like it's on the books there, and the review of the dog management strategy is due to commence late in 2020, and let the petitioners know about that and put their submissions in for that review, because it'll be then one block advertising and one block for people for consulting. Now, this dogs seem to follow me around in sense of when I was on the planning committee, the dogs was part of the planning committee's role, and now the dogs are part of the parks committee. It might have been, should be thrown over to the infrastructure committee in my view, but it's still an important issue for the community, but it takes up a lot of officer time, I'm sure. And this is, I think, is a sensible way of going.
Any discussion? No discussion. We'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 18.
Could you bring our Alderman Baracus back?
Yeah. Bring the Alderman Baracus, please. Item 18, Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll just wait for my esteemed colleague to come back. I move the motion that's on the books.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Thank you for that. Look, a number of times we've had the same people who have made a deputation to us, to the council, to the committee, saying that our consultation was inadequate to do with the new tracks that have been approved by council. Now, I think we had another thorough discussion about the number of people that were consulted at the time. It was a few years ago now. And I think a couple of times we've considered this before, we have accepted that the consultation was thorough. We also learnt that we had a more detailed look at each of the tracks, and the concerns that were raised by the deputation to us on last Thursday was that the track designers were taking those concerns into account. For example, when there was a crossover of a number of tracks, then the track was going to be designed to slow down the cyclists and to increase the safety of the walkers. The idea of having this track plan was to reduce the conflict between mountain bike riders and walkers, and having dedicated paths for the mountain bike riders, and having good, safe tracks for the walkers, and also having shared paths. So I think I'm satisfied that the council officers have done a superb job, and a number of them have got the approval from Wellington Park Trust to go ahead. I think that's happening now in terms of the final design of the final design of the track, and it will, as I said, it will take into consideration some of the concerns that were raised by the deputation, and on our website there is also more detailed information. So all I can say is we all I certainly love the mountain. I'm sure most of us here love the mountain, the opportunities for recreation, both mountain bike riding, which I don't think I'd ever do it, but walking particularly. I think we're responding to the community's needs for better mountain bike tracks, and also the needs for the walkers to be protected when they're shared, and also the general community. So I think overall it's balanced really well, and right at the beginning we did really good consultation. So I think as it goes on, as they are designed, I'm sure we might have a few, the people who made deputations to us may be more satisfied, I think. Thank you.
Further discussion?
Yes, thank you. Look, I do have concerns about how we have approached this, and I'll take a different opinion. And Mr. Fisher and I have had a number of discussions in relation to this. I'm not convinced, or certainly don't think that the people who did the deputation, petitioners, would necessarily be happy with this report and the response, because I don't know that it really addresses their concerns. So there is significant cultural and environmental values of the mountain. Obviously, you know, that's why we have, we look after it. The trust is there. Whether we are looking after it to the best of our ability, the trust is fairly under-resourced, as we well know. There are certain limitations in relation to that, but I just feel that I don't think they're going to be happy with their interpretation of how the process of engagement occurred in the first instance. And again, you know, Mr. Fisher will no doubt disagree with that, but I just feel like it wasn't the best of community engagement processes that we could have done, because it excluded various people along the way. So that's one thing. And the access, or the protection of some areas, I think, which we're finding out more and more about, with the cultural significance of the log haul areas, and how some of these bike tracks are cutting across this significant convict heritage. So I think that we somehow need to do more work in this space. We've got 7 kilometres of track going in, albeit not all in this area, but I just feel like we can't be blind to those concerns that have been raised. And we need to ensure that we're doing the best for the environment, as well as providing that need for those people who are mountain bike riders. You know, like it's really hard to balance. I don't know that we've really captured those concerns in relation to what has been brought through this petition.
Discussion? No further discussion?
Just because there has been a minority view expressed by the Deputy, the 4 tracks have had approval from the Trust. They put extra conditions on it. I can't talk about what happens in Trust meetings, but except that they were very thorough with these 4 tracks. As the other tracks in the plan become on the operational plan, they will go through the same scrutiny. Each track will go through the same scrutiny. So we're not, whilst we've got a plan, each of the tracks as they come up to the council for permission will go through an incredible scrutiny. The 4 tracks have started, this construction's already started. Due to budgets and things like that, I imagine it will take a number of years. Perhaps I could ask Mr. Fisher. He sat there in the second row there, and perhaps I could call him. And the question is, what period of time we're looking for the construction of the other tracks to complete the whole plan?
Through you, Lord Mayor, the whole plan was never intended to be completed in a short time frame at all. It's probably 10 years or even longer to do that work. The 4 tracks which were initially, there are 7 tracks in stage 1. There are 4 tracks we're in the process of completing. 2 tracks have been completed and the other 2 are underway at this moment. So it's really a decade's worth of work.
And so you confirm that more tracks will go through a rigorous process. Even if they're in the plan, they'll go through a rigorous process, including Council and the Wellington Park Trust.
Through you, Lord Mayor, you're right, this is the 6th time we've discussed this particular issue at Council. 4 of those events have been about the specific details of the specific tracks and the environmental, cultural heritage, Aboriginal heritage and ecological work that's been done with those tracks gives us information to actually define a location for the track, and the comments we've had from the cultural heritage consultant we've had on board is it's been an exemplary process and should be promoted in other work in other state parks and reserves.
So just to clarify for everyone, so whilst there's a plan where the tracks approximately will be, the detailed implementation of that would be mapping all the relevant heritage and cultural and botanical and so on before the track is actually finally designed and built.
Through you, Lord Mayor, that's correct.
Good, thank you.
Sorry, Alderman Briscoe, can I ask a question after you've finished yours? Just on, have you got, in terms of the actual track building process, there's been a few complaints come in to me. Is there somebody have you got one of your biodiversity team or someone up there just monitoring the kind of, people talk about swathes and worried about the scale of some of the tracks that are going in. Have you got someone, I guess, monitoring some of that?
Yes, we do. We do, and obviously in a track where it's an aspirational plan that relies upon site-specific detailing of the location, then that's very important. Whether we find an archaeological relic or cultural heritage items or even unforeseen geological elements, then each of those ones has to be considered on the day or in the pre-planning for that. So our staff, both from a project delivery perspective and in terms of oversight as the subject matter experts, Lindsay Ashland, for example, are on site to make those or assist in making those decisions.
Hey, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 19 is Soldiers Memorial Avenue. Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, I'll move the item that's on the books. One thing about...
Seconded by Councillor Burnett, or Deputy Lord Mayor.
One thing about longevity, and Alderman Zirko and myself, maybe the other next person, longevity, probably yourself, Harvey. Oh, sorry, but were you before Harvey?
Yeah.
Probably were.
I've only been here 17 years, Alderman Briscoe.
About half the time myself and
Loved every minute of it.
Yeah, I've loved every minute too, mostly. Anyway, this is a very important project, and I do remember, I think I was the chairman of Parks when the people said, look, there is an important cultural heritage of those trees up on the domain, and when it was explained to us that they were planted to commemorate soldiers and one nurse that died in the First World War, and the families used to use that as to go and commemorate their young person, usually every year for years and years and years, and had fallen into disrepair. It had been some of the trees had died, some of the track got obliterated, and has been a real success for the city. And obviously, this new action plan has been worked closely with the Friends of Soldiers Memorial Avenue, and that input is so great. So basically we're asking to endorse as a guiding document for the management of Soldiers Memorial Avenue, this action plan, which is quite extensive, and I don't know whether many people have read the whole lot of it, but things like increase the use of the site for public art, making sure the heritage site is managed properly, trying to get a Tasmanian Heritage Register listing, and wayfinding and entry points, things about maintenance, tree management. It has been and Aboriginal values, so it is an extensive document, guiding document, and so all I can say is that I commend the motion to the council.
Any discussion? There's no discussion, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. It's carried unanimously. Alderman Briscoe, item 20, the Narrania Heritage Museum.
Just a moment, I'll get my papers, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, thank you. I'll move the motion that's on the books. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sherlock. It's basically seeking Council's endorsement to provide ongoing support to the Narrania Heritage Museum Incorporated. A recent review of the Council's maintenance programs revealed garden and the tree maintenance within the grounds of this museum in Hampton Road was being undertaken by the Council, but the facility is not a Council-owned property. It may have been a handshake back in 1957, as things were probably done then, and continued, and now it just needs to be formalised. It is the entrance to the older part of Battery, the other side of Sandy Bay Road, Battery Point, and it's a much loved tourist destination, and I've been to garden parties there and tours and so on, and so it's an important cultural place in Hobart. And earlier someone, I think you, Lord Mayor, mentioned that we come to Hobart for the cultural experience, and a lot of tourists go in there for the cultural experience of looking at how wealthy colonial gentlemen and ladies and their families lived. And I'd love to have a house like that, but I could never afford one in Hobart these days, maybe in the past. So really it's just to formalise a handshake back in 1957. And it's not terribly expensive in the great scheme of things. A couple of fines would pay for it, I imagine. $2,050, it's basically estimated to cost for a yearly maintenance.
Any discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 21, Alderman Briscoe.
I think this is back to almost the good old days where Parks meetings continued for a while. I think it was the longest parking meeting we had. Parks meeting we had for about 3 years. Anyway, the good old days is the Parks was a central part of council business, and So I'll move the motion that's on the books.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
And we get high ratings in community surveys and that, so it must have worked well. So
Not as high as some of the functions from city services, though.
We don't quite know where it lies these days.
So what's the motion, Alderman?
It's on the books, I've just said. Yes. Continued support for the landscaping, the Wilson Street Pocket Park, and funding for site improvements be considered in the Capital Works program, an annual budget and estimated of $25,000 with annual operational expense of $4,000. So that's all we need to say.
Any discussion? No discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Now we do have item 8 from the closed, which Alderman Zuko brought forward. We might.
Yes, Lord Mayor. This is in regards to.
To that one. Seconded by Alderman Thomas.
Go out to tender for the Mercury, the tender for the Mercury. There's no other competition in respect of a major newspaper in the southern Tasmanian which we use, and it's just pointless to try and put it out to tender because there's no competition. If there was competition, we would put it out. So I say move.
Alderman Brackus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just I suppose it might be something that comes up as part of the Local Government Act review. But I can't help but think out loud how necessary, I know it's a requirement on us, it's not nothing that we can necessarily change, but given that we live in a world where it's quicker and more effective to communicate directly over digital channels, how relevant and keeping with the times the requirement for us to put out advertisements with the local newspaper is. Not much of a question, but there's not really much we can do about that. But is that something that's been considered in the review?
Through you, Lord Mayor, yes, I understand it is, and Lord Mayor's representing council on that group. We will be having some consultations further with elected members soon on that as well. So these are some of the things you might like to consider raising as part of that.
Just to add, although I think it was considered when they were reviewing the Local Government Act.
That's right.
And now that's kind of a little bit been put on hold while there's the kind of local government reform. So we'll all have to make sure they don't forget some of the good tweaks they were going to make to the Local Government Act, because that was one of them and there was quite a few others.
Just a question, and I don't know if we can discuss it in open now that this is in open, but does the report suggest whether the cost of advertising has increased by much? Has it increased? Do we know that? Or is that like a commercial in confidence kind of thing?
Sure. Do you know the answer? Oh, can you comment just broadly about whether there was an increase in advertising costs?
Lord Mayor, through you, I don't think there was a significant increase in costs. We're always very mindful of how much you spend and always adjusting the ads accordingly. There are nevertheless a number of ads that we are required to publish in the newspaper.
Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Now we do have a supplementary item, which is item 23, the licence agreement for Salamanca. I'm not sure who would move this one.
I'll move that, Lord Mayor.
Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Sherlock. Is that all fairly... Did you want to speak to the CEO? Is everyone clear on the recommendation? No discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. That brings to a close our open meeting. So moved by Alderman Barker, seconded by Councillor Sherlock, that we move into